Daniel Carter stood frozen in his boss's corner office, her words echoing in his mind like a thunderclap. Victoria Hale, the woman who commanded boardrooms with a single glance, who'd built an empire from nothing, had just asked him the most terrifying question of his life. Not about reports or deadlines, not about his performance or his future at the company. She'd looked at him with those piercing gray eyes and asked softly, "Why don't you just take me out instead?" And in that moment, everything Daniel had carefully built since his wife's death, every wall, every routine, every reason to stay safely numb, threatened to crumble. If you want to know how a widowed father and his formidable CEO boss broke every rule to find love again, stay with me until the end. And if this story touches your heart, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The coffee maker sputtered its last breath at 5:47 a.m., and Daniel Carter knew it was going to be one of those days. He stood in the narrow kitchen of his Queens apartment, watching the ancient machine leak brown water across the chipped laminate counter, and felt the familiar weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. 3 years. 3 years since cancer had stolen Rebecca from him, from Maya, from the life they'd planned together. 3 years of coffee makers breaking and light bulbs burning out, and the relentless grinding machinery of single parenthood that never stopped, never slowed, never gave him a moment to catch his breath. "Daddy?" Maya's voice drifted from the bedroom, small and sleepy. Daniel grabbed a dish rag and wiped up the coffee mess with practiced efficiency, his movements automatic. Everything was automatic now. Wake at 5:30. Make coffee. When the machine worked, pack Maya's lunch. Review his notes for whatever crisis Victoria Hale would throw at him that day. Get Maya ready for school. Subway to Manhattan, 12 hours at Hale Publishing. Subway home. Homework, dinner, bedtime. Sleep. Repeat. Coming, sweetheart. He tossed the rag in the sink and headed down the short hallway to her room. Maya sat up in bed, her dark curls wild around her face, Rebecca's face, and Daniel felt the familiar ache in his chest. 8 years old and already carrying too much, already too aware that their family was broken in ways that couldn't be fixed. "Is the coffee machine dead again?" she asked. Daniel smiled despite himself. "How did you know?" "I heard you say a bad word." "I didn't say anything." "You thought it really loud." Maya grinned, and for a moment she was just a kid, not the too serious child who sometimes caught him staring at Rebecca's photo with tears in his eyes. "Well, I'll think quieter next time. Come on, let's get you ready for school." The morning routine unfolded like clockwork. Daniel had learned efficiency in the 2 years since Rebecca's death. No wasted movement, no extra steps. Cereal and orange juice while Maya picked out her clothes. Quick shower while she brushed her teeth. Hair in a ponytail that was never quite as neat as Rebecca used to make it, but Maya never complained. They walked to PS 121 through streets already humming with early traffic, Maya's small hand in his. She chattered about her friend Emma's birthday party on Saturday, about the science project on butterflies, about everything except the question Daniel knew was always lurking beneath the surface. When will things be normal again? He didn't have an answer. Normal had died with Rebecca. At the school entrance, Maya hugged him tight. "Don't work too late, okay?" "I'll try, baby." "You always say that." She pulled back and gave him a look that was far too knowing for 8 years old. "Miss Hale works you too hard." "Miss Hale runs a big company. She needs people she can count on." "She should count on someone who has a real life." Maya stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you too, Maya Bear." He watched her disappear into the building, her pink backpack bouncing with each step, and felt the familiar guilt settle over him like a heavy coat. She was right. Victoria Hale did work him too hard. But the overtime paid for Maya's after-school program, for the small extras that made their cramped apartment feel like a home, for the college fund that Daniel contributed to religiously, even when it meant eating ramen 3 nights a week. The subway ride to Manhattan gave him 45 minutes to transform from dad into Daniel Carter, executive assistant to the CEO of Hale Publishing. He reviewed his notes on his phone, skimming through Victoria's calendar for the day. Board meeting at 9. Lunch with the literary agent from William Morris. Conference call with the London office at 3. dinner meeting with the best-selling author whose contract was up for renewal. It would be a long day. They were all long days. Hale Publishing occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in Midtown, all glass and chrome and the hushed efficiency of serious money. Daniel had worked there for 6 years, starting as a glorified mail clerk and slowly working his way up through determination and the kind of quiet competence that Victoria Hale noticed and rewarded. He'd been her assistant for 18 months now, and it was like working for a force of nature. Victoria arrived at exactly 8:15, as she did every morning, her heels clicking against the marble floor of the lobby with military precision. She was 42, 12 years older than Daniel, and she carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from building an empire from nothing. Tall, striking rather than beautiful, with silver streaking through her dark hair that she made no effort to hide. She wore power like other women wore perfume, naturally, effortlessly, and with absolute authority. "Good morning, Daniel." She didn't break stride as she passed his desk outside her office. "Board meeting prep? Ready and loaded on your tablet. The financial projections Marcus wanted are in the appendix. Coffee? On your desk. Black, no sugar. You're a lifesaver." She paused at her office door and glanced back at him. "What would I do without you?" It was a throwaway line, something she said often enough that it had become routine. But this morning, something in her expression was different. Tired, maybe. Or uncertain. Daniel had learned to read Victoria Hale's moods the way a sailor reads the weather, and this morning felt like the calm before a storm. "Let's hope you never have to find out," he said lightly. She studied him for a moment, her gray eyes searching his face for something he couldn't identify. Then she nodded and disappeared into her office, closing the door behind her. Daniel turned to his computer and began the familiar dance of managing Victoria's world. Emails to answer, calls to screen, emergencies to handle before they reached her desk. He was good at this work. The organization, the anticipation, the careful choreography of keeping a CEO's life running smoothly. It required no emotional investment, no vulnerability, no risk, just competence and consistency. Safe, predictable, numb, exactly what he needed. The morning passed in a blur of meetings and crisis management, a printing delay on their biggest fall release, a best-selling author threatening to jump to Random House, the CFO's concerns about their digital strategy. Daniel handled what he could and shuttled the rest to Victoria with efficient precision. At 12:30, she emerged from her lunch meeting looking thunderous. "The William Morris lunch?" Daniel asked. "Patrick Chen is an idiot. He wants 15% more for an author whose last 3 books haven't earned out their advances." Victoria dropped into the chair across from Daniel's desk, something she rarely did, and rubbed her temples. "I need a drink." "It's 12:30 in the afternoon." "I'm aware of the time, Daniel." But there was no real heat in her voice. She leaned back in the chair and closed her eyes. "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Stay so calm. Nothing rattles you. Even when everything's on fire, you're just steady." Daniel thought about the coffee maker that morning, about Maya's 2 serious eyes, about lying awake at 3 a.m. listening to the silence of his empty bedroom, about the constant grinding effort it took to keep moving forward when all he wanted to do was stop. "Practice," he said quietly. Victoria opened her eyes and looked at him with that searching expression again. "You've been through something. I can tell. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I recognize that look. That's the face of someone who's survived something terrible." Daniel's first instinct was to deflect, to change the subject, to maintain the professional distance that had protected him for 3 years. But something in Victoria's voice, a kind of weary honesty he'd never heard from her before, made him pause. "My wife died," he heard himself say. 3 years ago, cancer. I have a daughter, Maya. She's 8. The words fell into the space between them like stones dropping into water. Victoria didn't gasp or offer platitudes or do any of the things most people did when confronted with grief. She just nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she already suspected. "That explains a lot," she said. "The way you work, like you're trying to outrun something." "Maybe I am. Is it working?" Daniel thought about that. "No, but it keeps me busy." Victoria smiled, but it was a sad smile, full of understanding that went deeper than sympathy. I know something about that, about staying busy to avoid thinking too hard about things. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed. Victoria's 3 p.m. conference call with London was starting in 15 minutes. Duty calls, Victoria said, standing with her usual grace. She paused, one hand on the edge of his desk. Thank you for telling me. I know that wasn't easy. You're welcome. She walked back to her office, but at the door she turned. Daniel, after the London call, do you have a few minutes? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Something personal. Daniel felt a flutter of unease. Personal conversations weren't part of their professional dynamic. Victoria Hale was brilliant, demanding, occasionally terrifying, but always professional. Personal wasn't in the vocabulary. Of course, he said. The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept circling back to Victoria's words. Something personal. What could she possibly want to discuss? Was she unhappy with his work? Did she know about the times he'd had to leave early for Maya's school emergencies? Was she planning to let him go? The thought sent ice through his veins. He couldn't afford to lose this job. The salary, the benefits, the flexibility Victoria had shown when Maya was sick or when the school called, it was all that kept him afloat. At 4:30, Victoria's office door opened. Daniel, can you come in, please? He grabbed his tablet and followed her into the office, trying to read her expression for clues. But Victoria's face was carefully neutral as she gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. Close the door. Daniel's unease ratcheted up another notch. He closed the door and sat, tablet balanced on his knee, every muscle tense. Victoria sat behind her massive desk, and for a long moment she just looked at him. Then she did something Daniel had never seen her do in 18 months of working together. She looked uncertain. I need to ask you for a favor, she said finally, and I want you to know up front that you can absolutely say no. This isn't a work request, and there won't be any professional consequences if you decline. Okay, Daniel said slowly. Victoria took a breath. I'm terrible at this, at personal things. I've built this company from nothing. I've negotiated with some of the toughest people in publishing. I've stared down corporate raiders and hostile takeover attempts. But this, she gestured vaguely, this terrifies me. Daniel waited, completely lost. I'm 42 years old, Victoria continued. I've been married to this company for 20 years, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to have a life outside these walls. I have acquaintances, business contacts, people I see at industry events, but friends? Real friends? She shook her head. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about quarterly earnings or market share. Ms. Hale. Victoria, please, if I'm about to humiliate myself, the least you can do is use my first name. Daniel had never called her Victoria. It felt wrong, like a violation of the careful professional distance they maintained. But he nodded. Victoria, I've decided to try online dating. She said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. I know it's ridiculous. A woman my age with my profile, creating an account on some app like a desperate 25-year-old. But my sister won't stop nagging me about dying alone, and my therapist thinks it would be emotionally healthy to pursue romantic connections. And honestly, I'm just tired of going home to an empty apartment every night. Daniel understood that feeling more than she could possibly know, but he still didn't understand what this had to do with him. I created a profile last week, Victoria continued, and it's awful, completely awful. I sound like I'm interviewing candidates for an executive position, not looking for someone to have dinner with. My sister laughed for 10 minutes straight when she saw it. Despite himself, Daniel smiled. That bad? Worse. Which brings me to my favor. Victoria met his eyes directly. You're good with people, Daniel. You're warm, genuine, approachable, all the things I'm not. And you've been married, you understand how relationships work. I was hoping you might be willing to help me with my profile. Make me sound less like a corporate robot and more like an actual human being. The request was so unexpected, so completely outside anything Daniel had imagined, that for a moment he just stared at her. You want me to help you with your dating profile? I know it's an odd request, and completely inappropriate probably, but I trust you, Daniel. You're one of the few people in my life who sees me as more than just the CEO. And I'm asking as a friend, not as your boss. Friend. The word hung in the air between them. Were they friends? Daniel had never thought about it that way. Victoria Hale was his boss, demanding and brilliant and occasionally intimidating. But as he sat there, looking at the vulnerability in her eyes, he realized that somewhere over the past 18 months, something had shifted. She trusted him. And more surprisingly, he trusted her. Okay, he heard himself say. I'll help you. Relief washed over Victoria's face. Really? You're sure? Because you can absolutely... I'm sure. Though I have to warn you, I haven't been on a date in 10 years. My expertise might be pretty outdated. At this point, I'll take any help I can get. Victoria pulled out her phone and opened an app Daniel didn't recognize. Fair warning, it's really bad. She handed him the phone, and Daniel started reading. Victoria Hale, 42, CEO of Hale Publishing, seeking accomplished professional for intellectually stimulating conversation and mutually beneficial companionship. Must be financially independent, goal-oriented, and comfortable with a demanding career. No drama, no games, no emotional complications. Daniel winced. Oh, wow. I told you it was bad. It's not bad exactly. It's just... He searched for a diplomatic way to put it. Very professional. I sound like I'm hiring an employee. A little bit, yeah. Daniel scrolled through the rest of the profile. Her photo was from some industry event, stiff and formal. Her interests section read like a resume: classical music, modern art, international travel, wine collecting. When's the last time you actually collected wine? I have a very nice collection. But do you enjoy it? Or did you just buy it because successful people are supposed to have wine collections? Victoria opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Point taken. Daniel studied the profile more carefully, trying to see past the corporate armor to the woman underneath. Tell me something. What do you actually do for fun? Not what you think you should do or what looks good at cocktail parties. What makes you happy? Victoria thought about it for a long moment. I read. Old mystery novels, the kind with clever plots and witty dialogue. I take long walks in Central Park early in the morning before the crowds. She hesitated. I sing, badly, but I love it. When I'm home alone, I put on old jazz records and sing along. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. That was Victoria Hale, not the CEO, but the woman. Vulnerable, real, human. That's what needs to be in your profile, he said softly. Not wine collections and classical music. This, the real you. Victoria looked uncomfortable. The real me is messy and uncertain and probably not very attractive to potential dates. The real you is interesting, authentic, someone worth knowing. Their eyes met and something passed between them, a moment of connection that felt dangerous and exciting and completely unexpected. Victoria looked away first, clearing her throat. So where do we start? Daniel glanced at his watch. It was almost 5. Maya would be getting out of her after-school program soon, and he needed to pick her up by 6. I have to get my daughter, he said. But tomorrow? We could work on this during lunch if you want. That would be perfect. Victoria took her phone back, her professional mask sliding into place. Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate this. Of course. He stood to leave, but Victoria stopped him with a question. Your wife. What was she like? The question caught Daniel off guard. Nobody asked him about Rebecca anymore. People were uncomfortable with grief, with the messy reality of loss. They offered condolences and then changed the subject as quickly as possible. But Victoria's question wasn't uncomfortable. It was genuine. She was brilliant, Daniel said quietly. An emergency room doctor. She worked impossible hours, saved lives, came home exhausted, and still had energy to play tea party with Maya. She was funny and stubborn, and she sang in the shower really badly, like worse than you could possibly imagine. And she loved with her whole heart. No holding back, no reservations, just complete, fearless love. She sounds amazing. She was. Daniel felt the familiar ache, but it was softer now, worn smooth by time. Maya has her eyes. Every time I look at my daughter, I see Rebecca looking back at me. That must be hard. And wonderful, Both at the same time. Victoria nodded, understanding in her eyes. Thank you for sharing that with me. Daniel left her office feeling strangely lighter, as if some weight he hadn't known he was carrying had lifted. He gathered his things, sent a few final emails, and headed for the subway. The evening routine unfolded as predictably as the morning. Pick up Maya, who was full of stories about her day. Subway home. Homework at the kitchen table while Daniel made dinner, spaghetti with jarred sauce, quick and reliable. Bath time, story time, bedtime. But as Daniel sat in his living room later that night, his laptop open to finish some work emails, his mind kept drifting back to Victoria's office, to her vulnerability, her honesty, her unexpected request for help. He opened a new browser window and found himself looking at the dating app she'd mentioned. Out of curiosity, he created a profile for himself, something he'd sworn he'd never do. Single father, 30, works in publishing. And then he stopped, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was he doing? He wasn't looking for someone. He'd made peace with being alone, with channeling all his energy into Maya and work. Love was Rebecca's territory, not his anymore. But as he sat there in his quiet apartment, the only sound Maya's soft breathing from her bedroom, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Lonely. Not the desperate, crushing loneliness of the first months after Rebecca's death, but a quiet, persistent ache for connection. For adult conversation that went deeper than work emails and parent-teacher conferences. For someone to come home to, someone to share the small moments with. He closed the laptop without finishing the profile. It was too much, too soon, too risky. But the feeling lingered. The next day, Victoria appeared at Daniel's desk at 12:30 with 2 takeout salads and a determined expression. "Ready to make me sound like a human being?" she asked. They ate in her office with the door closed, Victoria's phone between them on the desk. Daniel asked questions, gentle probing into who she really was beneath the corporate armor. Victoria answered haltingly at first, then with increasing confidence. She talked about her childhood in Queens, the same borough where Daniel lived now, and how she'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through NYU. About starting Hale Publishing in a studio apartment with a maxed-out credit card and a dream. About the sacrifices she'd made, the relationships she'd neglected, the parts of herself she'd buried to build something lasting. "I had a fiancé once," she admitted, 10 years ago. "He gave me an ultimatum, him or the company. I chose the company." "Do you regret it?" "Sometimes. When I'm sitting alone in my apartment at 9 p.m. eating takeout and reviewing contracts." She smiled sadly. "But then I look at what we've built here, the hundreds of people we employ, the books we've brought into the world, and I think maybe it was worth it." "Maybe it can be both," Daniel said, "the company and someone to share it with." "Is that possible? For people like us?" "People like us?" Victoria gestured between them. "People who've given everything to survive, who've learned to keep moving forward even when it hurts. Can people like that really open up again? Really trust someone new?" Daniel thought about Rebecca, about the absolute certainty he'd felt with her, about how love had been easy and natural and right. And then he thought about the past 3 years, about the walls he'd built, about how the idea of letting someone in felt terrifying. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but maybe we owe it to ourselves to find out." They spent the next hour rewriting Victoria's profile. Daniel asked about her favorite memories, her secret guilty pleasures, the moments when she felt most herself. Slowly, a different picture emerged. Victoria, 42. "I built a publishing company from scratch, and I'm proud of it, but there's more to me than quarterly earnings. I sing along badly to Ella Fitzgerald. I get lost in mystery novels with impossible plots, and I believe the best conversations happen during long walks when nobody's trying to impress anyone. Looking for someone who's comfortable with success but not defined by it. Someone who understands that the best things in life require risk." "That's much better," Victoria said, reading it over. "Still terrifying, but better." "What's terrifying about it?" "It's honest. What if nobody responds? What if the real me isn't interesting enough? Then they're idiots." Daniel said it with such conviction that Victoria laughed. "You're good for my ego, Daniel Carter." "Somebody has to be." They fell into a comfortable silence, and Daniel realized with some surprise that he was enjoying himself. When was the last time he'd had a conversation that wasn't about Maya or work? When had he last felt this engaged, this present? Victoria seemed to be thinking something similar. "This was nice," she said quietly. "Just talking. No agenda, no crisis to solve, just talking." "Yeah, it was." Her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it and her eyebrows rose. "I already have 3 matches." That was fast. Should I respond to them? She looked almost panicked. "What do I say?" Daniel laughed. "You negotiate $1 million contracts and you're afraid of responding to a dating app message? Contracts have rules, clear parameters. This is just chaos." "Welcome to dating." Daniel stood and gathered his empty salad container. "Start with the basics, read their profiles, see if any of them actually seem interesting. Then just say hi. Keep it simple." "Simple, right." Victoria looked at her phone like it might explode. "I can do simple." Daniel headed back to his desk, but Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. "Daniel? Thank you for this, for not making me feel ridiculous." "You're not ridiculous, you're brave." He meant it, and from the look on Victoria's face, she knew he did. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. During the day, Daniel managed Victoria's professional life with his usual efficiency. But during lunch breaks and occasional quiet moments, they worked on her dating profile, responding to messages, navigating the strange world of online romance. Victoria showed him photos of potential matches. Daniel helped her craft responses that were warm without being desperate, interested without being too eager. They laughed over terrible pickup lines and cringed at awkward conversation starters. And somewhere in the middle of all that, something shifted. Daniel found himself looking forward to these moments, to Victoria's dry humor, to her unexpected vulnerability, to the way she listened when he talked about Maya. She asked about his daughter with genuine interest, not polite obligation. She remembered details, that Maya loved butterflies, that her favorite color was purple, that she wanted to be a scientist when she grew up. "She sounds remarkable," Victoria said one afternoon as they reviewed yet another potential match. "She is. She's the best part of my life." "That must be hard, though, being everything to her, mother and father both." Daniel thought about that. "It's less about being both parents and more about being present." Rebecca was present even when she was exhausted from a double shift. I try to do the same. "You're a good father, Daniel." The compliment settled warmly in his chest. "I'm trying." Victoria's dating life progressed slowly. She went on a few dates. A lawyer who talked only about himself, a finance guy who was clearly intimidated by her success, a professor who seemed promising until he asked if she'd consider scaling back her work hours. "Why do they all assume I need to change?" she asked after the third disappointing date. They were in her office again, the city glittering below them in the early evening light. "Why can't someone just accept that I love my work, that it's part of who I am?" "Because they're intimidated. You're successful, powerful, brilliant. That scares a lot of men." "It shouldn't." "No, it shouldn't, but it does." Daniel hesitated, then added, "The right person won't be scared. They'll be impressed." Victoria looked at him with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. "You're not scared of me. I work for you. I've seen you at your most terrifying. At this point, nothing scares me." "I'm not terrifying." "You absolutely are, but in a good way." She smiled, and Daniel felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in his chest. He recognized it immediately and tried to push it down. This was his boss, his very successful, very unavailable boss. Whatever he was feeling was inappropriate and unprofessional and absolutely could not happen, but the feeling persisted. It grew stronger during their lunch conversations when Victoria shared stories from her childhood that made him laugh. It intensified during late afternoon coffee breaks when she asked about his day with genuine interest. It bloomed during the small moments, a shared glance across a meeting table, her hand briefly touching his as she passed him a file, the way she said his name with a softness she used for no one else. Daniel told himself he was imagining it, that grief and loneliness were making him see things that weren't there, that Victoria Hale was helping him with his career out of professional courtesy, nothing more. But then came the evening when everything changed. It was a Friday, nearly 7 p.m. Daniel should have left hours ago, but Maya was at a sleepover with her friend Emma, and he'd stayed to help Victoria prepare for a major presentation on Monday. They'd ordered Chinese food and were working through the slides when Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and sighed. Another match. This one's a doctor. What does he say? You seem like a woman who knows what she wants. I respect that. Would you like to get coffee sometime? Victoria read the message with zero enthusiasm. He's probably perfect, successful, respectful, appropriate age. I should respond. But she didn't move to type anything. Daniel looked up from the presentation. You don't sound excited. I'm not. Victoria set her phone down and rubbed her temples. I thought this would be easier, that I'd meet someone, feel a connection, and things would just progress naturally. But every date feels like another business meeting. Polite conversation, careful positioning, both of us performing for each other. Maybe you haven't found the right person yet. Or maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I've been alone so long I don't know how to be with someone anymore. She looked at Daniel with something like desperation in her eyes. Does it ever get easier after loss? Do you ever feel like you could open yourself up to someone new? The question hit too close to home. Daniel thought about his empty apartment, about lying awake at 3 a.m., about the profound loneliness of grieving alone. Honestly, I don't know. I've been so focused on surviving, on taking care of Maya, that I haven't let myself think about it. But if you did think about it, if you let yourself imagine being with someone new? Daniel met her eyes, and in that moment, the truth he'd been avoiding for weeks rose up and demanded to be acknowledged. I think it would terrify me, he said quietly. Not because I don't want it, but because I do. And wanting something means risking losing it again. Victoria nodded slowly. Yes, exactly that. They sat in silence, the city lights blinking on around them, and Daniel felt the weight of all the things they weren't saying pressing down on his chest. You should respond to the doctor, he said finally. He sounds nice. Nice. Victoria picked up her phone, stared at it for a long moment, then set it down again without typing anything. Daniel, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you helping me with this, really? It can't just be because I asked. Daniel thought about that, about why he looked forward to these conversations, why he found excuses to stay late, why the thought of Victoria going on successful dates made his stomach twist with something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. Because you're my friend, he said carefully, and friends help each other. Is that all I am to you? A friend? The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and electric. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. What else would you be? Victoria stood and walked to the window, her back to him. I've been on 6 dates in the past 2 weeks, Daniel. 6 perfectly nice men who should, by any reasonable measure, be exactly what I'm looking for. And all I can think during every single one is that I'd rather be here, having lunch with you, talking about mystery novels and bad coffee, and what makes a good life. Daniel's breath caught. Victoria, I know it's inappropriate. I know you work for me and there are rules and power dynamics and 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. She turned to face him and there were tears in her eyes. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this, that every time you smile at me, my heart doesn't do something stupid. That I don't go home thinking about the things you said, the way you looked at me, the possibility that maybe there could be something here. Daniel stood slowly, his mind racing. This was impossible, inappropriate, dangerous on so many levels. And yet, I've been telling myself the same thing, he admitted, that I'm imagining it, that it's just loneliness or gratitude or some kind of transference. But Victoria, when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in 3 years. What? Alive. The word fell between them like a key turning in a lock. Victoria crossed the space between them in 3 strides, and then she was standing inches away, close enough that Daniel could see the silver flecks in her gray eyes, could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that made his head spin. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, he agreed. I'm your boss. You work for me. This violates every professional boundary. I know. It could ruin both our careers. The gossip alone. Victoria. Daniel reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands the way he used to touch Rebecca when words weren't enough. Stop listing reasons why this is a bad idea and tell me what you want. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I want to stop being so careful all the time. I want to risk something real instead of settling for safe. I want... Her phone buzzed loudly on the desk, breaking the moment. They both jumped back, the spell broken. Victoria grabbed her phone, her hands shaking slightly. The doctor had sent another message. I'll take your silence as a no. Good luck finding what you're looking for. She stared at the screen, then looked up at Daniel with an expression of absolute clarity. I don't want coffee with a doctor, she said quietly. I don't want polite conversation and careful positioning and another relationship that looks good on paper but feels empty. I want messy and real and terrifying. I want... She took a breath. Why don't you just take me out instead? The question landed like a thunderclap. Daniel stared at her, his mind spinning. She was serious. Victoria Hale, his boss, his friend, the woman he'd spent weeks helping find someone else, was asking him out. All the reasons why this was impossible crashed over him. Maya, his job, the power dynamic, the office politics, the risk of losing everything if this went wrong. But beneath all those logical objections, something else stirred, something that felt like hope. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's my whole world. Anyone in my life has to understand that she comes first. I know. I'm not wealthy. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Queens. I can't take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive things. I don't care about any of that. And if this doesn't work out, we'll still have to see each other every day. It could make everything incredibly awkward. It could. Victoria stepped closer again. Or it could be the best decision either of us ever made. But I'm willing to take that risk if you are. Daniel thought about Rebecca, about the love they'd shared, about how she'd taught him that life was meant to be lived fully, not just survived, about how she would have told him to take the chance, to be brave, to let himself feel again. And he thought about Maya, about the conversations they'd had lately, where she'd asked carefully, cautiously, if Daddy was ever going to be happy again. Maybe happiness wasn't something he could plan for or achieve through careful risk management. Maybe it was something you had to reach for, even when it scared you. Okay, he heard himself say. Yes, let's try this. Victoria's smile was like sunrise. Really? Really? But I need to talk to Maya first. Make sure she's okay with this. She has to be okay with this. Of course. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood there grinning at each other like idiots, the tension of weeks finally released, and Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not the closing of one chapter and opening of another, more like the discovery that there had been more pages all along, just waiting to be written. So, Victoria said, suddenly looking uncertain again. What happens now? Now? Daniel glanced at his watch. Now I go home and have a very interesting conversation with my daughter. And then, if she gives me the green light, I'm taking you to dinner. Where? Somewhere not fancy. Somewhere we can actually talk without worrying about who might see us. That sounds perfect. Daniel gathered his things, his hands still shaking slightly with adrenaline and fear, and something that felt dangerously like joy. At the door, he turned back. Victoria, for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. I think we both are. He left her standing in her office, the city glittering behind her, and headed home to tell his daughter that maybe, just maybe, they were going to take a chance on something new. The subway ride felt different somehow. The same cramped car, the same tired commuters, but Daniel felt lighter. Terrified, yes, but also alive in a way he hadn't felt since before Rebecca got sick. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Daniel typed back, thank you for asking. And then, because he was apparently becoming someone who took risks, I can't wait for our date. Her response came immediately. Neither can I. Daniel put his phone away and watched Queen slide by outside the window. In a few minutes, he'd be home. He'd make himself dinner, think about how to explain this to an 8-year-old, and try to convince himself that he wasn't making a terrible mistake. But for now, sitting on the subway with Victoria's words still glowing on his phone screen, Daniel let himself imagine what it might feel like to be happy again. And for the first time in 3 years, the possibility didn't feel impossible. It felt like hope. The apartment was dark when Daniel let himself in, and the silence felt different than usual. Not empty, exactly. More like expectant, as if the space itself knew something had shifted. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and stood in the small entryway, his heart still racing from what had happened in Victoria's office. "Why don't you just take me out instead?" The words echoed in his mind, impossible and thrilling and terrifying all at once. Daniel moved through the apartment on autopilot, turning on lights, checking the refrigerator without really seeing what was inside, his thoughts spinning in circles. He had said yes, to his boss. To a woman who could fire him with a single word, who occupied a different universe of wealth and power and influence. He'd said yes to upending the careful, safe life he'd built for himself and Maya. What the hell was he thinking? His phone buzzed. Maya texting from Emma's house. "Having so much fun. Emma's mom made pizza and we're watching a movie. Love you, Daddy?" Daniel smiled despite his anxiety and typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Have a great time." Another buzz, this one from Victoria. "Are you okay? You left so quickly." Daniel stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Was he okay? He didn't know. He felt like he'd just jumped off a cliff without checking if there was water below. "I'm good. Just processing. This is all very new. For me, too. But good new, I think." "Yeah, good new." He set his phone down and forced himself to make dinner. Scrambled eggs and toast, simple and mindless. But his appetite had vanished, replaced by a knot of anxiety that sat heavy in his stomach. The real test would be tomorrow, when he picked up Maya from Emma's house. When he had to look his daughter in the eye and explain that Daddy might start dating someone. That the person was his boss. That everything might be about to change. How did you even have that conversation with an 8-year-old? Daniel spent the night tossing in bed, alternating between excitement and pure terror. At 3 a.m., he found himself standing in front of Rebecca's photo on the dresser, the one from their honeymoon in Maine. She was laughing, wind whipping her hair across her face, absolutely radiant. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered to the photo. "I don't know if this is brave or stupid or both, but I felt something tonight, Beck, something I thought I'd never feel again. And I'm scared out of my mind." The photo didn't answer, of course, but Daniel could almost hear Rebecca's voice in his head, the way she'd sounded when she was trying to talk him through his anxiety. "Stop overthinking it. You're allowed to be happy, Daniel. You're allowed to live." He climbed back into bed and finally fell asleep just before dawn, dreaming of Victoria's smile and Rebecca's laugh and Maya's uncertain eyes, all tangled together in ways that made sense in the dream but would be impossible to explain when he woke. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and the familiar buzz of his phone alarm. Daniel dragged himself out of bed, showered, and tried to rehearse what he'd say to Maya. Every version sounded wrong, too casual, too serious, too defensive. He picked her up at 10 a.m. Emma's mother, Christine, answered the door with her usual cheerful energy. "They were up until midnight giggling," she reported. "I have no idea what they find so hilarious, but they had a wonderful time." Maya appeared behind her, still in her pajamas, her curls even wilder than usual. "Daddy, can Emma come over next weekend, please?" "We'll see, sweetheart. Go get your stuff." Maya disappeared back into the house, and Christine lowered her voice. "She's a great kid, Daniel. You're doing an amazing job with her." "Thanks. Some days I'm not so sure." "Trust me, you are." Christine hesitated. "And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you should take care of yourself too. Maya needs a dad who's happy, not just one who's surviving." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. "I'm working on it." "Good." Christine smiled warmly. "You deserve to be happy." The drive home was filled with Maya's chatter about the sleepover, about the pizza and the movie, and how Emma's little brother had tried to crash their party. Daniel listened, making appropriate noises, his mind already racing ahead to the conversation they needed to have. Back at the apartment, Maya changed out of her pajamas while Daniel made them lunch. Grilled cheese sandwiches, her favorite, with tomato soup on the side. Comfort food for what was shaping up to be an uncomfortable conversation. They ate at their small kitchen table, Maya still talking a mile a minute. Daniel waited for a natural pause, then took a breath. "Maya Bear, Can I talk to you about something? She looked up from her sandwich, immediately alert. Kids had radar for when conversations were about to get serious. Am I in trouble? No, baby. Nothing like that. I wanted to talk to you about something that might be changing. Maya set down her sandwich, her expression cautious. What kind of changing? Daniel thought about all the careful explanations he'd rehearsed, all the diplomatic ways to phrase this. Then he threw them all out and went with the truth. You know how I've been helping Ms. Hale with some personal stuff? The woman I work for? The one who works you too hard? Despite his nervousness, Daniel smiled. Yeah, that one. Well, we've been spending more time together lately, just talking, getting to know each other better, and I've realized that I really like her, as more than just my boss. Maya's eyes widened. Like? Yeah, like. Daniel reached across the table and took her small hand in his, and she asked if I wanted to take her to dinner, like a date, and I said yes. But I wanted to talk to you about it first, because you're the most important person in my life, and I wouldn't do anything that would make you uncomfortable. Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then she asked the question Daniel had been dreading. Is she going to be my new mom? No, baby. Nobody is ever going to replace your mom. Nobody could. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. This would just be trying to get to know someone better. Seeing if we like spending time together, that's all. No big commitments, no promises. Just seeing what happens. But what if you do like her? What if she moves in here or something? That's way down the road, Maya. And if we ever got to that point, which is a huge if, you would be part of every decision. This is your home too. Your opinion matters. Maya pulled her hand back and picked at her sandwich crust, her face scrunched up in thought. Daniel waited, his heart pounding. If she said no, if this upset her too much, he'd call the whole thing off. Victoria would understand. Maya came first. Always. Finally, Maya looked up. Do you like her a lot? I think I do, yeah. She's smart and funny and interesting, and she makes me feel happy, which I haven't felt in a while. You've been sad, Maya said quietly, since Mommy died. I know you try to hide it, but I can tell. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I have been sad, but not because of you, sweetheart. You're the best thing in my life. But you're lonely. I can tell that too. Maya's eyes were far too wise for 8 years old. Ms. Chen at school says it's healthy for grown-ups to have other grown-ups to talk to, not just kids. Ms. Chen is right. Maya thought about it some more, then said something that completely floored Daniel. Mommy would want you to be happy. She told me that before she got really sick. She said I had to take care of you and make sure you didn't forget how to smile. Daniel's eyes burned with sudden tears. She said that? Yeah, we had a special talk, just me and her. Maya's voice wavered. She said it was okay to be sad, but not okay to stay sad forever. She said life is supposed to have happy parts too. Daniel got up from his chair and pulled Maya into a fierce hug, burying his face in her wild curls. Your mom was the smartest person I ever knew, so you should listen to her. Maya hugged him back just as tightly. You can take Ms. Hale to dinner, but I want to meet her first, before you decide if you really like her. Daniel pulled back and looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. You want to meet her? Yeah, because if she's going to be around, I need to know if she's nice. And if she's mean to you, I'll tell her to go away. Despite everything, Daniel laughed. You do that? I'm very protective, Maya said seriously. Emma says I'm fierce. You absolutely are. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Okay, I'll ask her if she'd like to meet you, but no promises about when, okay? This is all very new and we're taking it slow. Okay. Maya went back to her sandwich, then paused. Daddy, does she know about Mommy? She does, I told her. And she wasn't weird about it. No, she was really understanding. Maya nodded, satisfied. Then I think she might be okay. The relief that flooded through Daniel was almost overwhelming. He'd been so afraid Maya would react badly that this would upset the careful balance they'd achieved. But she was handling it with more grace than he dared hope for. They finished lunch and spent the afternoon like they always did on Saturdays: laundry, grocery shopping, the mundane tasks that filled their weekends. But everything felt different now, charged with possibility. That evening, after Maya was in bed, Daniel sat on his couch with his phone, staring at Victoria's name in his contacts. He'd been texting her updates throughout the day, brief messages about the conversation with Maya, about her surprisingly mature reaction. But now he needed to actually call her to figure out what came next. He pressed dial before he could talk himself out of it. Victoria answered on the second ring. "Hi. Hi." Daniel felt suddenly awkward, like a teenager calling his crush. "Is this a good time?" "Perfect time. I've been hoping you'd call." A pause. "How are you? Really?" Terrified, excited, completely out of my depth. Daniel laughed shakily. "So pretty much how I expected to feel." "That makes two of us. I've been pacing my apartment for the past hour trying to figure out if I made a complete fool of myself last night." "You didn't. You were brave. Honest. It was amazing." He could hear the smile in Victoria's voice. "You talked to Maya?" "I did. She took it better than I expected. She's 8 going on 35, apparently." Daniel relayed the conversation, including Maya's insistence on meeting Victoria before anything progressed. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She wants to meet me? Wow. That's a lot of pressure." "You negotiate with New York Times best-selling authors, and you're nervous about meeting an 8-year-old? Authors I can handle. Children are terrifying. What if she doesn't like me?" "Then we'd have a problem, because Maya's opinion is the only one that really matters here." Daniel said it gently, but he needed Victoria to understand. "I meant what I said. She comes first, always." "I know, and I respect that. Victoria sighed. "I don't have much experience with kids. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I'm too formal or too stiff or—" "Victoria," Daniel interrupted her spiral. "Just be yourself. Maya's a good judge of character. If you're genuine with her, she'll respond to that." "Just be myself, right? The self that intimidates grown men." She laughed nervously. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "What is?" "Caring what someone thinks of me. I've spent so long not caring, building walls, protecting myself, and now I'm worried what an 8-year-old will think. It's terrifying." Daniel understood that feeling completely. "Welcome to vulnerability. It's uncomfortable, but it beats the alternative." "Which is?" "Being alone and telling yourself you're fine with it." Ouch! That hit a little too close to home. They talked for another hour, their conversation meandering from serious to playful and back again. Victoria told him about her Saturday, a workout class she'd hated, a book she was reading, the way her apartment felt emptier than usual after last night's revelation. Daniel talked about grocery shopping with Maya, about the normalcy of their routine, about how strange it felt to have something to look forward to. "So," Victoria said eventually, "about that dinner. Should we wait until after I meet Maya, or—" "I think we should wait," Daniel said, though part of him wanted to say the opposite. "I want to do this right, and that means making sure Maya's comfortable with all of it." "That's very responsible of you. Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised, just impressed. Most men I've dated would have compartmentalized, kept the dating separate from the family stuff." Victoria paused. "Of course, most men I've dated were also terrible, so maybe that's not the best comparison." Daniel smiled. "How about next Saturday? We could do something casual, maybe the park?" Maya loves the Central Park Zoo. "The zoo? I haven't been to the zoo in 20 years. "Then you're overdue." "What do you say?" "I say yes. Absolutely yes. Just—" "Daniel, what if this is a mistake? What if we're risking too much?" The question hung between them, heavy with all the things they weren't saying. Daniel thought about his job, about the office gossip, about the 100 ways this could blow up in their faces. "It might be," he said honestly, "but I think not trying would be a bigger mistake. At least for me." "Yeah." Victoria's voice was soft. "For me too." They said goodnight a few minutes later, and Daniel sat in the quiet of his living room feeling more awake than he had in years. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of his excitement, but beneath it was something stronger. Hope. The week that followed was surreal. At work, Daniel and Victoria maintained their professional dynamic with careful precision. They didn't mention what had happened Friday night. They didn't let their interaction shift into anything that might raise eyebrows. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they'd always been, a competent CEO and her efficient assistant. But underneath the professional surface, everything had changed. Victoria would catch his eye across a conference table and smile, just slightly, and Daniel would feel warmth spread through his chest. He'd bring her coffee, and their fingers would brush as she took the cup, the contact lasting a heartbeat longer than necessary. Small moments, invisible to everyone else, that felt monumental. Wednesday brought a crisis. Their biggest author threatening to walk unless they renegotiated his contract. Daniel stayed late helping Victoria strategize, and when they finally resolved it at 8 p.m., she sagged against her desk in relief. "You're brilliant, you know that?" she said. "I just made some phone calls. You saved us $500,000 and kept our biggest author happy. That's not just phone calls." Victoria looked at him with open admiration. "I couldn't do this without you." Daniel wanted to cross the room, to pull her close, to kiss her the way he'd been thinking about for days. But they were still at work, still visible through the glass walls of her office, still playing by rules they hadn't figured out how to break yet. "3 more days," he said quietly. "Until Saturday." "Until Saturday," Victoria smiled. "I'm counting down too." Thursday, Daniel took his lunch break to shop for new clothes. Nothing too fancy, he couldn't afford fancy, but he wanted to look presentable when Victoria met Maya. He settled on a nice button-down shirt and his best jeans, casual but neat. The saleswoman who helped him was elderly, friendly, with kind eyes. "Special occasion?" she asked. "Sort of. I'm introducing someone important to my daughter." "Ah, new girlfriend?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "Maybe. Hopefully." "Your daughter must be excited." "She's cautiously optimistic, which is basically her personality in general." The woman laughed. "Smart kid. You raised her well." She folded the shirt carefully and handed it to him. "And honey, you look nervous. That's good. It means you care. The ones who aren't nervous are the ones you have to worry about." Daniel thanked her and left, feeling slightly better, though his stomach was still doing nervous flips every time he thought about Saturday. Friday afternoon, Victoria appeared at his desk looking uncharacteristically flustered. "I bought a book," she announced. "Okay." "About talking to children. It has chapters on age-appropriate conversation topics and how to build trust." She looked almost embarrassed. "I stayed up until midnight last night reading it." Daniel tried not to laugh. "You're researching how to talk to my daughter?" "I want to do this right. Maya deserves someone who makes an effort." The fact that Victoria cared enough to buy a book, to study like she was preparing for a board meeting, made Daniel's heart squeeze. "You're going to be fine. Just talk to her like she's a person, not a foreign species. The book says children appreciate when adults treat them with respect and don't talk down to them." The book is right, but Victoria? Daniel waited until she met his eyes. "Relax. Maya's not going to grill you. She's just a kid who wants to make sure you're nice to her dad." "That's what I'm afraid of. What if I'm not nice enough? What if—" "Take a breath." Daniel smiled at her. "You're overthinking this. Tomorrow is just a trip to the zoo. Low pressure, casual, fun. No pop quizzes, I promise." Victoria took a visible breath and nodded. "Low pressure, casual, fun. I can do that." "Yes, you can." That evening, Maya helped Daniel clean the apartment with unusual enthusiasm. "It has to look nice," she insisted, scrubbing the kitchen counter for the 3rd time. "She's not coming here, remember? We're meeting at the zoo." "But what if she wants to come here after? First impressions are important, Daddy. Emma's mom says so." Daniel watched his daughter organize the bookshelf by color and wondered when she'd gotten so grown up. "You really want this to go well, don't you?" Maya paused in her organizing. "I just want you to be happy, and if she makes you happy, then I want her to like us." "She already likes me, and she's going to love you." "How do you know?" "Because you're amazing. How could she not?" Maya went back to the bookshelf, but Daniel could see her smiling. Saturday morning arrived with overcast skies that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Daniel woke early, too anxious to sleep, and spent an hour making breakfast that neither he nor Maya really ate. They both just pushed food around their plates, nervous energy crackling between them. "What time are we meeting her?" Maya asked for the fourth time. 11 o'clock, at the zoo entrance. "What if she's late?" "Then we'll wait." "What if we're late?" "We won't be. We're leaving in 20 minutes. Maya disappeared into her room and emerged wearing her favorite purple dress, the one she usually saved for special occasions. She'd even tried to tame her curls with a headband. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Do I look nice enough?" Daniel knelt down to her level. "You look perfect. But Maya, she's going to like you for who you are, not what you're wearing, okay?" "Okay." But Maya smoothed down her dress one more time anyway. They took the subway to Central Park, both of them quiet and tense. Daniel checked his phone compulsively, even though Victoria had texted that morning to confirm she was on her way. His palms were sweating. His heart was racing. This felt bigger than any first date he'd ever been on, because it wasn't just about him anymore. They arrived at the zoo entrance 10 minutes early. Daniel bought their tickets while Maya stood beside him, bouncing on her toes with nervous energy. "What if she doesn't come?" Maya whispered. "She'll come." "But what if—" "Maya Bear, take a breath. It's going to be fine." At exactly 11 a.m., Daniel saw Victoria walking toward them through the crowd. She dressed casually, jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes look almost turquoise, her hair down instead of in its usual professional twist. She looked younger, more approachable, and absolutely terrified. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Victoria smiled nervously. Daniel smiled back, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. Maya grabbed his hand. "Is that her?" "That's her." "She's pretty." "Yeah, she is." Victoria reached them, and Daniel saw her take a quick, steadying breath. Then she looked down at Maya, and her expression softened into something genuine and warm. "Hi," she said. "You must be Maya. I'm Victoria. Your dad has told me wonderful things about you." Maya studied her with serious eyes, and Daniel held his breath. This was the moment. Everything hinged on the next few seconds. Then Maya smiled, a small, cautious smile, but real. "Hi, Daddy says you're really smart and you run a big company." "I do run a company, but I bet you're pretty smart too." "I'm very good at science. I got 100% on my last test about butterflies." "Butterflies? That's impressive. I don't know very much about butterflies." "I could teach you," Maya offered. And just like that, the ice broke. They entered the zoo together, Maya walking between them, chattering about the animals she wanted to see. Daniel caught Victoria's eye over Maya's head, and she looked relieved and amazed all at once. The first hour was cautious but positive. They watched the sea lions, laughed at the penguins, and Maya explained everything she knew about each animal with the confidence of someone who'd read every placard twice. Victoria listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest, not just polite attention. At the children's zoo, Maya wanted to pet the goats. Daniel hung back, letting Victoria go with her, watching as his daughter showed his, girlfriend? Dating prospect? Whatever Victoria was, showed her how to hold her hand flat so the goats wouldn't nibble her fingers. "They're gentle if you're calm," Maya explained seriously. "You have to respect them." "That's very wise advice," Victoria said. "I'll remember that." They got ice cream despite the cool weather, sitting on a bench while Maya demolished a chocolate cone and Victoria picked at a vanilla one with the delicate precision of someone not used to eating in public. "This is nice," Maya announced, chocolate all over her face. "I'm glad you're not mean." Victoria blinked in surprise, then laughed. A genuine, unguarded laugh that made her look 10 years younger. "I'm glad I passed that test." "Oh, you haven't passed all the tests yet. I have questions." Daniel groaned. "Maya, we talked about this." "What?" "You said I could ask her stuff." Maya turned to Victoria with a completely serious expression. "Do you like my daddy a lot? Or just a little?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "A lot. He's one of the kindest, smartest people I know." "Are you going to make him work late all the time?" "I'm going to try very hard not to. He deserves time with you." "Do you think kids are annoying?" "No, I think kids are interesting. They ask better questions than most adults." Maya considered this, licking her ice cream thoughtfully. Okay, one more question. If you and Daddy keep dating, are you going to try to be my mom? The question hung in the air, heavy with significance. Daniel started to intervene, but Victoria held up a gentle hand. No, she said quietly, meeting Maya's eyes with complete honesty. I could never be your mom, and I wouldn't try. Your mom was special, and nobody can replace her. If your dad and I keep seeing each other, I'd just like to be your friend. Is that okay? Maya thought about it for a long moment, then she nodded. That's okay. I could use more friends. Me too, Victoria said softly. They spent another hour at the zoo, the awkwardness gradually dissolving into something easier. Maya showed Victoria her favorite exhibit, the snow leopards, and explained everything she'd learned about them in school. Victoria shared a story about seeing tigers in India on a business trip, and Maya listened with rapt attention. By the time they left, Maya was holding both their hands, chattering happily about everything they'd seen. Daniel felt something tight in his chest loosen, replaced by a cautious, fragile joy. At the subway entrance, they paused to say goodbye. Maya surprised everyone by hugging Victoria. Thank you for the ice cream, she said. Thank you for teaching me about butterflies, Victoria replied, and Daniel could see tears shining in her eyes. Maya turned to Daniel. Can I wait over there? I want to look at that street performer. She pointed to a musician playing guitar 20 feet away, far enough to give them privacy but close enough to stay safe. Daniel nodded and Maya skipped off. Victoria watched her go, then turned to Daniel with wonder on her face. She's extraordinary. She is. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion. And she liked you, really liked you. I liked her too, so much. Daniel, she's... Victoria shook her head, clearly struggling for words. You've done an amazing job raising her. We're doing our best. They stood looking at each other, crowds swirling around them, and Daniel felt the full weight of what was happening. This was real. Victoria had met Maya, and it had gone well, and now there was no going back. So, Victoria said softly, about that dinner? Daniel smiled. How about next Saturday? Just the two of us this time. I'd like that. A lot. They made plans quickly, a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, nothing fancy, somewhere they could actually talk. Then Maya came running back, full of excitement about the street performer, and it was time to go. Daniel and Maya headed down into the subway, and Daniel turned to wave at Victoria one last time. She stood at the top of the stairs watching them, and even from a distance, he could see she was smiling. On the train home, Maya leaned against his shoulder. Daddy. Yeah, baby? I think she's good for you. She made you smile a lot today. She did, didn't she? Are you going to take her to dinner? Next Saturday. Maya nodded, satisfied. Good. Just don't forget about me when you're busy being in love. Daniel pulled her closer. I could never forget about you. Never in a million years. I know, but I wanted to say it anyway. That evening, after Maya was asleep, Daniel's phone rang. Victoria. Hi, he said, warmth flooding through him just at hearing her voice. Hi. I couldn't stop thinking about today. About Maya. About the zoo. About all of it. Me neither. I was so nervous. I thought I'd say something wrong or be too formal or... You were perfect, Daniel interrupted. Completely perfect. Maya told me she thinks you're good for me. She did? Victoria sounded amazed. That's... wow. I don't know what to say. Say you're still interested in dinner next Saturday. I'm very interested in dinner and in you and in figuring out what this could be. They talked for another hour, their conversation easy and intimate in the darkness. They made plans for Saturday, argued playfully about restaurant choices, shared stories about their week, and slowly, carefully, they began building something neither of them had expected to find. When they finally said goodnight, Daniel sat in his quiet living room feeling more alive than he had in 3 years. The fear was still there, fear of change, fear of loss, fear of risking his heart again. But it was eclipsed by something stronger. The possibility that life might hold more than just survival. That happiness wasn't something that died with Rebecca. That maybe, just maybe, he deserved a second chance at love. Daniel looked at Rebecca's photo one more time before heading to bed. In the dim light, she seemed to be smiling at him, encouraging him forward. I'm trying, Beck, he whispered. I'm really trying. And for the first time since she died, he felt like she'd approve. The restaurant Victoria chose was a small Italian place in Carroll Gardens, tucked between a bookstore and a florist on a quiet, tree-lined street. Daniel arrived 15 minutes early, his palms sweating despite the cool October evening. He'd changed his shirt 3 times before leaving, finally settling on the blue button-down Maya had declared handsome enough for a real date. A real date. The word still felt foreign in his mouth. He hadn't been on a real date in over a decade, hadn't sat across from someone and tried to be charming and interesting and worth their time. With Rebecca, everything had been easy from the start, 2 medical students bonding over terrible cafeteria coffee and impossible schedules. There had been no performance, no anxiety, just an immediate recognition that they fit. This felt nothing like that. This felt terrifying. Daniel checked his watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes, then forced himself to stop. He was standing outside the restaurant like some nervous teenager, and if he didn't pull himself together, Victoria would arrive to find him having a full-blown panic attack on the sidewalk. Daniel! He turned and his breath caught. Victoria stood a few feet away, and she looked nothing like the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms. She'd worn a simple black dress, elegant but understated, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the soft glow of the street lamps, she looked younger, softer, almost uncertain. Hi, he managed. You look beautiful. A smile lit up her face. You clean up pretty well yourself. They stood there for a moment, both suddenly shy, the easy camaraderie of the office and the zoo replaced by the charged awareness of what this actually was. A date, a statement of intent, a step forward into unknown territory. Should we go in? Victoria asked. Yes, absolutely. The restaurant was warm and intimate, all exposed brick and candlelight and the rich smell of garlic and tomatoes. The hostess led them to a corner table, mercifully private, and left them with menus and knowing smiles. Daniel picked up his menu and stared at it without really seeing the words. His heart was hammering so hard he was sure Victoria could hear it across the table. I'm nervous, Victoria said suddenly. I don't want to be, but I am. Is that ridiculous? The admission broke through Daniel's own anxiety. If you're ridiculous, then I'm ridiculous. My hands are actually shaking. She reached across the table and took his hand, her touch warm and steady. We're both ridiculous together, then. That's one way to start a relationship. Is that what this is? Victoria's voice was soft, questioning. A relationship. Daniel turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. I don't know. Maybe we get to decide that, but I'd like it to be. Me too. The waiter appeared, breaking the moment, but giving them both a chance to breathe. They ordered wine, a Chianti that Victoria admitted she actually enjoyed, not just collected, and Daniel let himself relax slightly. This was Victoria. He knew her. He'd spent 18 months learning to read her moods, anticipating her needs, understanding the woman behind the executive mask. This was just an extension of that, he told himself, just deeper, more personal, more real. How was Maya after last weekend? Victoria asked once the waiter had left. Any second thoughts about me? None. She asked me at least 20 times this week when we're all going to hang out again. Daniel smiled at the memory. She wants to show you her butterfly project. Apparently it's very important that you see it. I'd love to see it. She was remarkable, Daniel. The way she talked about everything, her curiosity, her confidence. You should be so proud. I am. Every single day. Daniel paused, then decided to be honest. She also asked if you're my girlfriend now. Victoria's eyebrows rose. What did you tell her? I told her I didn't know yet, that we were still figuring things out. He met her eyes. Was that okay? I didn't want to presume. It's more than okay. It's honest. Victoria squeezed his hand. Though for the record, I'd be happy with that label. If you would. Yeah? Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. Girlfriend and boyfriend, at our age, that sounds almost absurd. Partner sounds too clinical. Significant other sounds like a tax form. I think girlfriend and boyfriend work just fine. They smiled at each other across the candlelight, and something shifted. The nervousness didn't disappear entirely, but it transformed into something else. Anticipation, excitement, the thrill of possibility. The wine arrived and they toasted to new beginnings. The conversation flowed more easily then, finding its rhythm the way their office interactions always had. Victoria told him about her week, a difficult negotiation with an author's agent, a marketing crisis averted, the small victories that made up her days. Daniel shared stories about Maya's latest school adventures and the ongoing saga of their apartment building's broken elevator. I still can't believe you live in a one-bedroom, Victoria said, not judgmentally, just curious. Where does Maya sleep? She has the bedroom. I take the couch. Victoria's eyes widened. You've been sleeping on a couch for 3 years? It's not that bad. It's actually pretty comfortable. And Maya needs her own space, somewhere that feels stable and hers, especially after losing her mom. Daniel shrugged. It works for us. You're a better person than I am. I complain if my mattress isn't exactly the right firmness. You've also built an empire from nothing. I think you've earned some comfort. I don't know what you're doing, raising Maya alone, working full-time, sacrificing your own comfort for her stability. That takes a different kind of strength. Victoria's expression was serious, admiring. I run a company. You're building a human being. That's infinitely harder. Daniel felt something catch in his throat. Nobody had ever put it that way before. Most people saw single parenthood as something to pity or overcome, not as an achievement worth recognizing. Thank you, he said quietly. That means a lot. Their food arrived, pasta for both of them, rich and fragrant and exactly what the cool evening called for. They ate and talked, the conversation ranging from the mundane to the profound, with an ease that surprised them both. Victoria told him about growing up in Queens, about a father who drank too much, and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. About learning early that success was the only escape from poverty, that vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. I was ruthless, she admitted, twirling pasta on her fork. Especially in my 20s and 30s, I stepped on people, made decisions that hurt others if it benefited the company. I'm not proud of all of it. But you've changed, Daniel observed. Have I? Or have I just gotten better at hiding it? You're not hiding anything from me right now. And what I see is someone who's honest about her past, who's trying to be better. That's not ruthless. That's human. Victoria set down her fork and looked at him with such intensity that Daniel felt pinned to his seat. You see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. I see what's there. You're not as hard as you think you are, Victoria. Maybe not with you. She paused, seeming to wrestle with something. I need to tell you something about work, about us working together. Daniel's stomach tightened. Here it was. The conversation he'd been both dreading and expecting. The practical realities that complicated everything. I've been thinking about the optics, Victoria continued. About what happens on Monday when we go back to the office. We can't just pretend nothing's changed. People will notice, and when they do, there will be talk. I know. I don't want you to be the subject of office gossip. I don't want people thinking you got ahead because of our relationship, or that I'm taking advantage of my position. Victoria's voice was firm, the CEO emerging even in this intimate setting. So I think we need to go to HR. Be transparent about what's happening. Let them know we're dating and ask for guidance on how to handle it professionally. Daniel hadn't expected that. He thought maybe she'd suggest keeping it quiet, hiding it until they figured out if this was serious. The fact that she wanted to be open about it, to face the complications head on, said everything about how seriously she was taking this. When? He asked. Monday. First thing. Before anyone else finds out and it becomes a scandal instead of a transparent relationship between colleagues. Victoria reached for his hand again. I know it's fast. I know we've only been on one official date. But Daniel, I'm not interested in hiding you, in pretending this isn't happening. I'd rather face the consequences of being honest than sneak around and feel ashamed of something that makes me happy. You're sure? Because this could get complicated. There might be rules about reporting structures, about... I don't care about complicated. I care about doing this right. Her grip tightened. Do you trust me? Daniel thought about the past weeks, about Victoria's vulnerability, about the way she'd been with Maya, about every moment that had led them here. Yes, I trust you. Then let's be brave together. They finished dinner in a bubble of shared determination and cautious hope. When the check came, they argued briefly about who would pay before agreeing to split it, Victoria insisting that she wasn't going to start their relationship by pulling rank. Outside the restaurant, the October night had turned chilly. Daniel shrugged off his jacket and draped it over Victoria's shoulders without thinking, the gesture automatic and natural. "Thank you," she said, pulling it closer around her. "Very chivalrous. My mom raised me right." They walked slowly down the quiet street, neither quite ready for the evening to end. Brooklyn felt different at night, softer, more intimate, the brownstones glowing with warm light from within. "I haven't done this in so long," Victoria admitted. "Just walked with someone. No destination, no purpose. Just being. It's nice, isn't it? It's terrifying. All this space for thinking and feeling and being uncertain." But she smiled as she said it, and when she slipped her hand into his, Daniel felt his heart kick against his ribs. They walked for blocks, talking and falling silent and talking again. Victoria told him about the books she was secretly reading, romance novels she'd never admit to at work. Daniel shared his dream of someday writing, of taking all the stories he'd absorbed working in publishing and creating something of his own. "You should do it," Victoria said firmly. "You have the talent. I've read your emails, your reports. You write beautifully. It's different, writing for work versus writing something real. So start small. Write for yourself. See what happens." They ended up on the Brooklyn Heights promenade, looking across the water at the Manhattan skyline. The city glittered like a scattered jewel box, beautiful and indifferent to their small human drama. "I used to come here," Victoria said quietly, "when I was first starting the company. When things got really hard and I wanted to quit, I'd stand here and look at all those buildings, all those other people fighting their own battles, and I'd remind myself that I wasn't alone, that everyone was struggling with something. Did it help? Sometimes. Other times I'd just cry and then go back to work." She turned to face him, the wind whipping her hair across her face. "But I never told anyone about it. Not my sister, not my therapist, not anyone. I kept it private, like everything else." "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I don't want to keep secrets from you. Because you make me want to be honest, even when it's hard." Victoria reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "Because I think you might be important, really important, and that scares me more than anything else." Daniel covered her hand with his own. "I'm scared too. Of this, of what it means, of letting someone in again. But Victoria, I think you might be worth being scared for." "Just might be?" He smiled. "Definitely are." She kissed him then, standing on the promenade with the city spread out before them and the wind cutting through their clothes. It was tentative at first, almost shy, two people learning the geography of each other. But then something ignited, and the kiss deepened into something urgent and real and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria laughed shakily. "Okay, so that's definitely happening." "Yeah, definitely." They caught a cab back to Manhattan, sitting close in the back seat, fingers intertwined. Daniel walked her to her apartment building, a gleaming high-rise in the West Village that probably cost more than Daniel would make in 5 lifetimes. "Do you want to come up?" Victoria asked, then immediately shook her head. "No, scratch that. I want you to come up, but I think we should wait. Do this at a pace that feels right for both of us." "I think that's wise." Daniel kissed her again, softer this time, more promise than passion. "Thank you for tonight, for everything. Thank you for taking a chance on me." He waited until she was safely inside before heading home, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. The evening had exceeded every hope and exceeded every fear simultaneously. He and Victoria were really doing this. They were together. And tomorrow, they'd face the consequences. Maya was already asleep when Daniel got home, staying overnight with a neighbor while Daniel was on his date. He stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, and felt the familiar surge of protective love that defined his every decision. "I think this is going to be okay, baby girl," he whispered. "I think we're going to be okay." Monday morning came too quickly. Daniel woke with his stomach in knots, anxiety and excitement warring for dominance. He dressed carefully, professionally, and spent the subway ride rehearsing what he'd say to HR. By the time he reached the office, his hands were clammy and his heart was racing. Victoria was already there, of course. She always arrived before everyone else. When Daniel reached his desk, there was a note waiting. Conference room B, 8:15. We've got this. At 8:10, Daniel made his way to the conference room. Victoria was already there, along with Patricia Chen from HR, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd been with the company almost as long as Victoria. Daniel, thank you for coming. Patricia gestured to a chair. Victoria has briefed me on the situation. I wanted to hear your perspective as well. Daniel sat, feeling like he was facing a tribunal. My perspective is that Victoria and I have developed feelings for each other outside of work. We want to pursue a relationship while maintaining our professional integrity. We're here to understand what that looks like from a policy standpoint. Patricia nodded, making notes on her tablet. I appreciate the transparency. Many people in your position would have tried to hide this, which inevitably leads to complications. She looked between them. The company doesn't prohibit workplace relationships. However, given the power dynamic, Victoria as CEO and you as her direct report, we need to implement some safeguards. What kind of safeguards? Victoria asked. First, Daniel would need to report to someone else. The COO, probably. You two can't maintain a direct reporting relationship while romantically involved. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact, not judgmental. Second, full disclosure to the board. They need to know about this relationship to avoid any perception of impropriety. Third, any decisions regarding Daniel's compensation, promotion, or termination would need to be reviewed by both myself and the COO. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Would I still be your assistant? He asked Victoria. Patricia answered before Victoria could. That's complicated. The optics of the CEO's boyfriend being her assistant aren't great. It looks like favoritism, regardless of how professional you both are. So what are you suggesting? Victoria's voice had taken on an edge. I'm suggesting we look at other positions for Daniel within the company. Positions that would utilize his skills without putting him in direct daily contact with you. Patricia pulled up something on her tablet. We have an opening in our acquisitions department, editorial liaison. It's actually a step up from his current position. Better title, better pay. He'd be working with our editors to identify promising manuscripts and authors. It seems like a natural fit for someone with Daniel's background. Daniel and Victoria looked at each other. This was happening faster than either of them had anticipated. In the space of one meeting, Daniel's entire professional life was being reorganized. Can I think about it? Daniel asked. Of course. But Daniel... Patricia's expression softened slightly. I know this feels like you're being punished for being honest. You're not. We're trying to protect both of you. Office relationships are difficult enough without the added complication of power dynamics. This gives you both a chance to build something real without constantly navigating conflicts of interest. The meeting ended with Patricia promising to send Daniel the job description by end of day. He and Victoria walked back to her office in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them both. Inside her office, with the door closed, Victoria turned to him with worry etched across her face. I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd move this fast. It's okay. It makes sense, actually. I can't be your assistant and your boyfriend. That's not sustainable. But you love your job. You're brilliant at it. I don't want you to feel like you're being pushed out because we're together. Daniel thought about it carefully. I'm not being pushed out. I'm being offered an opportunity. One I probably wouldn't have gotten if we weren't together, which is ironic. He smiled slightly. And honestly, the acquisitions position sounds interesting, more creative, more autonomy. Maybe this is good. You're sure? No, but I'm willing to try. He reached for her hand, a gesture that already felt natural. We said we'd be brave together, remember? Victoria squeezed his fingers. Together. The next weeks were a whirlwind of change. Daniel accepted the acquisitions position and began the transition process. His replacement as Victoria's assistant was a competent woman named Sarah, who seemed baffled by the sudden opening but grateful for the opportunity. Daniel trained her while simultaneously learning his new role, and the cognitive whiplash left him exhausted most evenings. The office gossip, predictably, was immediate and vicious. Daniel heard the whispers that he'd slept his way into a promotion, that Victoria was having some kind of midlife crisis, that the whole thing would implode spectacularly within months. He tried to ignore it, but it stung more than he wanted to admit. Victoria faced her own challenges. The board had been surprisingly supportive, but there were still whispers that she was letting personal feelings compromise her professional judgment. She responded by working even harder, putting in longer hours, being more demanding than ever to prove she wasn't going soft. It put strain on their nascent relationship. Their first fight happened on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks into Daniel's new position. They'd planned to have dinner together, but Victoria had to cancel last minute for an emergency board call. "This is the third time in 2 weeks," Daniel said when she called to apologize. He was standing in his apartment, having already started cooking dinner for 3. He'd invited Victoria to finally come over and meet Maya at home. "I know, and I'm sorry, but this is important. The London office is having issues, and everything is important with you, Victoria. Everything is an emergency that only you can handle." "That's not fair. I run a company. Things come up. And I have a daughter who's been waiting to show you her room for 2 weeks, who made a special dessert because she was excited you were finally coming over. But I guess that's not important enough." The silence on the other end of the line was cold. "Don't put that on me. Don't make me choose between my company and your daughter. I'm not making you choose anything. I'm asking you to follow through on commitments, to value the people in your life as much as you value your work. I do value you, both of you, but I also have responsibilities that existed long before we started dating. And I'm one of those responsibilities now? Something to check off your list when it's convenient? Daniel, that's not what I meant. I have to go. Maya's waiting." He hung up before Victoria could respond, his hands shaking with anger and disappointment. Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face falling when she saw his expression. "She's not coming, is she?" "No, baby. I'm sorry. She had to work." "It's okay." But Maya's voice was small and Daniel could see the hurt in her eyes. This was exactly what he'd been afraid of. Victoria's work consuming everything, leaving no room for the people who needed her. His phone rang. Victoria calling back. He let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times that evening. Daniel ignored all of them, focusing instead on Maya, on making dinner special despite the disappointment, on reassuring her that Victoria's absence wasn't about her. At 10 p.m., after Maya was asleep, Daniel finally listened to Victoria's voicemails. The first was defensive, insisting she'd had no choice. The second was frustrated, accusing him of being unfair. The third, left just 20 minutes ago, was different. "Daniel, I'm sorry. You're right. I should have found a way to make it work. I should have prioritized you and Maya over the board call. I'm just..." A long pause. "I'm scared of letting the company slip, of proving everyone right who says I can't have both a career and a personal life. But that's not your problem or Maya's problem. That's mine. And I'm going to do better. Please call me back. Please." Daniel stared at his phone, anger warring with empathy. He understood her fear, but understanding didn't erase the hurt in Maya's eyes. He called her back. "Daniel?" Victoria's voice was thick, like she'd been crying. "I'm so sorry to both of you." Maya made brownies, special ones with chocolate chips and caramel. She spent an hour on them. "I know, I'm the worst." "You're not the worst. You're just someone who doesn't know how to balance yet. But Victoria, you have to learn. Because Maya, she's already lost one important person. I can't let her get attached to someone who's going to keep disappointing her." "I understand. And you're right to protect her. She comes first. She should come first." Victoria took a shaky breath. "Can I make it up to you both? This weekend? I'll clear my entire schedule. No work, no phone calls, no emergencies, just the 3 of us. Whatever Maya wants to do." Daniel wanted to say no, to make her feel the disappointment they'd felt. But that wasn't who he was, and it wouldn't fix anything. "Saturday," he said. "Come for breakfast. Maya wants to show you her butterfly project and her room and everything. Come at 9 and plan to stay all day." "I'll be there. I promise. And Daniel, I love you. I know it's fast and maybe too soon to say it, but I do. I love you. And I love who you are with Maya, and I love the life you've built. I don't want to mess that up." The words hit Daniel square in the chest. Love. She loved him. And the terrifying thing was, he thought he might love her too. Not the easy, natural love he'd had with Rebecca. Something different, harder one, more complicated, but real. "We'll see you Saturday," he said quietly, not quite ready to say the words back. "Don't be late." "I won't. I swear." Saturday morning, Victoria arrived at 8:55, carrying bags from a fancy bakery and looking nervous enough to shatter. Maya answered the door, cautious at first, but Victoria immediately knelt down to her level. "Maya, I'm so sorry about Wednesday. I made a promise and I broke it, and that's not okay. I brought you something to apologize, but I know it doesn't fix it." She handed Maya a box. Inside was a detailed model butterfly, a monarch, Maya's favorite, with wings that actually moved. Maya's eyes went wide. "This is so cool. I saw it and thought of you. But Maya, I want you to know that if I make a promise to you from now on, I'll keep it, even if it means telling important people no. You're important too." Maya studied her seriously, then nodded. "Okay, come see my room." Daniel watched them disappear down the hallway, his heart aching with something between hope and fear. This could work. If Victoria really meant what she said, if she really could learn to balance, this could actually work. The day unfolded with surprising ease. Victoria admired Maya's butterfly project with genuine enthusiasm, asked intelligent questions, and took pictures to show her colleagues. They made lunch together, grilled cheese again, Maya's specialty, and Victoria told stories about growing up in Queens that had Maya laughing until she snorted. In the afternoon, they went to Prospect Park and flew the kite Daniel had bought Maya for her birthday. Victoria had never flown a kite before, and her initial attempts were so comically bad that even she started laughing at herself. "I run a multi-million-dollar company, but I can't operate a kite," she said, watching it nosedive for the third time. "Different skill sets," Daniel said, helping her untangle the string. "Not everything requires an MBA." As the sun started to set, they walked back to Daniel's apartment, Maya between them, chattering happily. She took both their hands, swinging between them, and Daniel caught Victoria's eye over her head. She smiled at him, genuine and unguarded, and he felt something settle in his chest. After Maya was in bed, Daniel and Victoria sat on his worn couch with cups of tea, the apartment quiet around them. "Thank you for giving me another chance," Victoria said softly. "With both of you. Thank you for showing up, for meaning it." "I did mean it, about loving you." She turned to face him. "I know you didn't say it back, and that's okay. I just needed you to know." Daniel set down his tea and took her hands. "I think I love you too. It's different than what I had with Rebecca. Messier, more complicated, scarier in a lot of ways. But it's real. And I want to see where it goes." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "Really." He pulled her close and she melted into him, her head on his shoulder. "But Victoria, this only works if you can really make space for us, for Maya and me. Not just when it's convenient, but consistently. We need to know we matter. You do matter. You both matter more than anything." She pulled back to look at him. "I'm going to prove that to you, however long it takes." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Victoria asked, "Can I tell you something about the board meeting Wednesday?" "If you want to." "It wasn't actually an emergency. I mean, it was important, but not urgent. I could have rescheduled." She looked down at their joined hands. "I panicked about coming here, about meeting Maya on her turf, about this getting more real. So I manufactured a reason to cancel, and immediately regretted it." "You sabotaged us." "Yeah, I did. Because that's what I do when things get too important. I push them away before they can hurt me." Victoria met his eyes. "But I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to push you away. I want to be brave enough to let this be real." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Then we'll be brave together. Both of us. When one of us gets scared, the other one holds steady. Deal?" "Deal." They talked into the night about their fears and hopes, about what they wanted this relationship to look like. It wasn't easy conversation. They disagreed about boundaries, about how public to be, about how to integrate their lives. But they kept talking, kept working through it, kept choosing each other. When Victoria finally left, well past midnight, Daniel stood at his window and watched her cab disappear into the night. The fear was still there, the uncertainty about whether they could really make this work. But beneath it was something stronger, the certainty that he wanted to try, that Victoria was worth trying for, that maybe, just maybe, happiness wasn't something that happened once in a lifetime. Maybe it was something you could build twice if you were brave enough to risk your heart again. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. Victoria proved true to her word, carving out time for Daniel and Maya with a determination that surprised them both. She came to Maya's school science fair and asked questions that made Maya glow with pride. She learned to make grilled cheese the way Maya liked it, extra crispy with the crust cut off. She kept a change of casual clothes in her office so she could go straight from work to their apartment without looking like she'd stepped out of a board meeting. But the office remained a minefield. Daniel's new position in acquisitions was challenging in ways he hadn't expected. He was good at it. His years as Victoria's assistant had taught him to read manuscripts quickly, to spot potential, to understand what would succeed in the market. But his colleagues watched him with undisguised suspicion, waiting for him to fail, ready to attribute any success to Victoria's influence rather than his own merit. "They think I'm a fraud," he told Victoria one evening in early November. They were in her apartment, a rare occurrence as Daniel usually preferred the comfortable chaos of his own place. But Maya was at another sleepover, and Victoria had insisted on cooking him dinner. The result was only moderately edible pasta, but the effort had been endearing. "You're not a fraud. You're brilliant." Victoria refilled his wine glass with more confidence than she'd shown with the cooking. "You brought in that memoir last week that everyone's excited about, which people are already saying I only found because you tipped me off." "Did I tip you off?" "No, I found it through a query letter like everyone else." Daniel rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "But the perception is what matters. Everything I do, good or bad, gets filtered through our relationship." Victoria was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in her glass. "Do you regret it? Taking the new position? Being with me?" "No, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't harder than I expected." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I just wish I could prove myself on my own merit, without everyone assuming I'm getting special treatment." "You will. It'll just take time." But time brought new complications instead of resolution. In mid-November, Marcus Chen, the COO, who was now technically Daniel's supervisor, called him into his office. Marcus was a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who'd worked with Victoria for over a decade. He'd always been cordial to Daniel, but their relationship had become noticeably cooler since the announcement of Daniel's relationship with Victoria. "Close the door," Marcus said, his tone making Daniel's stomach tighten. Daniel sat, trying to project calm confidence. "What's this about?" "Your manuscript recommendation for the Hayes memoir, the one Victoria greenlit for acquisition yesterday." "What about it?" Marcus pulled up something on his computer. "I've received complaints from 3 senior editors that the manuscript wasn't properly vetted through normal channels, that it bypassed our usual review process and went straight to Victoria's desk." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It went through the exact same process every other acquisition goes through. I read it, wrote my recommendation, submitted it to the acquisitions committee. They approved it unanimously. And then you mentioned it to Victoria." "Of course I mentioned it to Victoria. She's the CEO. She has final approval on all major acquisitions." Daniel kept his voice level with effort. "I discussed it with her the same way every other editor discusses their projects with her. There was nothing inappropriate about it." "The optics matter, Daniel. When the CEO's boyfriend is recommending manuscripts and she's approving them, people talk. They question whether her judgment is compromised." "Her judgment isn't compromised. The acquisitions committee approved it first. 3 senior editors read it and agreed it was solid. Victoria's approval was a formality." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Daniel with an expression that might have been sympathy or might have been calculation. "I'm not saying the memoir isn't good. I'm saying you need to be more careful, more transparent. Document every step of your process so there can be no question of impropriety." "I already do that." "Then do it more. Because Daniel, fair or not, you're under more scrutiny than any other editor in this building. One misstep and it won't just reflect on you, it'll reflect on Victoria too." The meeting left Daniel feeling scraped raw. He made it back to his desk on autopilot, his mind churning with frustration and anger and the bitter understanding that Marcus was right. He couldn't just be good at his job. He had to be perfect, beyond reproach. And even then, people would find reasons to doubt him. He texted Victoria, "Can we talk tonight? After Maya's asleep?" Her response came immediately. "Of course. My place or yours?" "Yours. I need to get out of my head." That evening, after settling Maya with the neighbor who'd become their go-to babysitter, Daniel took the subway to Victoria's apartment. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old NYU t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. It was the most casual he'd ever seen her, and something about it made his chest ache. "Hey." She pulled him inside and wrapped her arms around him. "Rough day?" Daniel held her tight, breathing in her perfume and the underneath scent that was just her. "Marcus called me in, about the Hayes memoir." He felt Victoria stiffen. "What did he say?" They moved to her couch and Daniel recounted the conversation. Victoria's expression grew darker with each sentence, her jaw tight with anger. "He had no right to question your judgment," she said when Daniel finished. "The memoir went through proper channels. The committee approved it. You did nothing wrong." "But he's right about the optics. People are watching everything I do, waiting for me to prove I'm just sleeping my way to success." "You're not." "I know I'm not. You know I'm not." "But Victoria, we can't control what people think. And as long as we're together while I work at Hale Publishing, there's going to be this cloud over everything I accomplish." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his knee. "What are you saying?" "I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just tired of fighting this battle every single day, of having my work questioned, my integrity doubted, my relationship scrutinized." Daniel ran his hands through his hair. "And the worst part is I can't even complain about it without sounding ungrateful. I have a good job that I genuinely enjoy. I have you. I should be happy. But you're not." "I'm happy with you, with us. But at work?" He shook his head. "I feel like I'm constantly on trial." Victoria stood and walked to her windows, looking out at the city lights. "I could fix this, you know. I could make it clear to everyone that your work is separate from our relationship. I could be more public about praising other editors, more careful about how I interact with you professionally." "You already do all that." "Then I could do more. I could recuse myself entirely from any decisions involving your manuscripts. Let Marcus handle all of that." "That won't stop the gossip. Nothing will stop the gossip except time, or—" Daniel stopped, the unspoken alternative hanging heavy in the air. Victoria turned to face him. "Or what? Or us breaking up? Is that what you're thinking?" "No." "Maybe. I don't know." Daniel stood and joined her at the window. "I don't want to break up. I love you. I love what we're building together. But I also need to be able to take pride in my work, and right now everything feels tainted. So what do we do?" It was the question Daniel had been asking himself all afternoon. What could they do? They'd already been transparent with HR, already restructured their reporting relationship, already bent over backward to maintain professional boundaries. And still, it wasn't enough. "Maybe I need to look for a position at another publisher," he said quietly. Victoria's face went pale. "You'd leave Hale?" "Not because I want to, but because it might be the only way to prove I can succeed on my own merit. That I'm not just Victoria Hale's boyfriend who got lucky. You're so much more than that. Everyone who actually works with you knows that. But the people who don't work with me directly don't see it, and their opinions matter too, especially in an industry as small as publishing." Daniel took her hands. "I don't want to leave, but I also can't keep second-guessing every decision, wondering if people think you're pulling strings for me." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This is my fault. If I hadn't asked you out, if I'd just kept things professional—" Don't do that." Daniel pulled her close. "I wouldn't change what we have for anything. Not for a job, not for office politics, not for anything. But that doesn't mean we can ignore the reality of the situation." They stood holding each other, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them both. Finally, Victoria pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Don't make any decisions yet," she said. "Let me think about this. There might be other options we haven't considered." "Like what?" "I don't know yet. But give me a few days to figure it out, please? Daniel wanted to argue, to point out that some problems didn't have neat solutions, but the desperate hope in Victoria's eyes stopped him. Okay, a few days. They spent the rest of the evening trying to pretend everything was normal, but the conversation hung over them like a storm cloud. When Daniel left around midnight, Victoria kissed him at the door with an intensity that felt like both promise and plea. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "I won't let this break us." Daniel wanted to believe her, but as he rode the subway home through the midnight darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading toward a crisis neither of them knew how to prevent. The next few days were tense. Victoria was distracted at work, spending hours in closed-door meetings that Daniel wasn't privy to. He tried to focus on his manuscripts, on proving his worth through sheer competence, but the anxiety gnawed at him constantly. Maya noticed something was wrong. "You're sad again," she said Thursday evening over dinner. "Like you used to be before Ms. Victoria." Daniel tried to smile. "Just work stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Ms. Victoria? Are you fighting?" "No, we're not fighting. We're just trying to figure some things out." Maya pushed her peas around her plate with a fork. "Emma's parents got divorced last year. She said they were always figuring things out before it happened." Daniel's heart clenched. "Maya, that's not what's happening here. Victoria and I aren't married, and we're definitely not getting divorced. We're just dealing with some work complications." "But you're still together." "Yes, absolutely yes." Maya looked at him with those two wise eyes. "Promise? Because I really like her, and you're happy with her. I don't want you to be sad again." Daniel got up from his chair and pulled Maya into a hug. "I promise we're still together, and whatever happens with work, that won't change, okay?" "Okay." But Maya's voice was small, and Daniel cursed himself for letting his stress spill over into their home life. Friday afternoon, Victoria appeared at Daniel's desk, unusual enough that it drew stares from the nearby cubicles. She looked tired but determined, her professional armor firmly in place. "Do you have a few minutes?" she asked formally. "I'd like to discuss something with you." Daniel followed her to a small conference room, acutely aware of the eyes tracking their movement. Inside, Victoria closed the door and the blinds, creating a bubble of privacy in the glass-walled building. "I've been talking to the board," she said without preamble, "about a new initiative I want to launch. A subsidiary imprint focused on discovering and developing new voices. Smaller, more nimble than our main line. Less commercial pressure, more creative freedom." Daniel wasn't sure where this was going. "Okay? I want you to run it." The words didn't make sense for a moment. Then they did, and Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Victoria, no. That's exactly the kind of thing that'll make people think, I know how it looks, but hear me out." Victoria pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. "I've been planning this for months, long before you and I started dating. The board's been asking for ways to diversify our list, to take more chances on unconventional voices. A boutique imprint makes sense strategically." "Then why me? Why not someone with more experience, more credibility?" "Because you have the instincts for it. In 3 months, you've found 2 manuscripts that are generating serious buzz. You understand what makes a story work, and you're willing to take chances on voices that don't fit the traditional publishing mold." Victoria clicked to the next slide. This imprint would be separate from Hale Publishing proper. Different office, different staff, different reporting structure. You'd report directly to the board, not to me. It would be your operation, your decisions, your successes or failures. Daniel stared at the presentation, his mind racing. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd dreamed about. Creative control, autonomy, the chance to build something meaningful. But the timing was impossible to ignore. "People will say you created this position for me." Let them. The business case is solid, and the board approved it unanimously. If you succeed, it won't matter how you got the job. And Daniel? Victoria's voice softened. "This isn't about us. Or it's not just about us. You're genuinely the best person for this role. I wouldn't offer it to you otherwise, relationship or no relationship." "When would this start?" "January 1st. Gives you time to transition, to build your team, to develop your first list." Victoria paused. "I know this doesn't solve everything. People will still talk, but at least you'd be building something that's clearly yours. succeeding or failing on your own terms. Daniel looked at the presentation, at the careful planning and strategic thinking that had gone into it. This was Victoria at her best, seeing a problem and engineering a solution that served multiple purposes. The imprint made business sense, gave Daniel autonomy, and created the professional distance they needed. It was brilliant. It was also terrifying. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Take the weekend. Talk to Maya if you want. This would mean changes for all of us." Victoria hesitated, then added, "But Daniel, whatever you decide about the job, it doesn't change us. Even if you decide to leave Hale entirely, we're still together. That's non-negotiable." Daniel managed a smile. "Non-negotiable, huh?" "Completely. I didn't fight this hard for you just to let office politics tear us apart." They left the conference room separately, maintaining professional distance. But Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the offer. It was generous, exciting, and fraught with complications. If he succeeded, he'd prove himself capable of running his own operation. If he failed, people would say Victoria had handed him something he couldn't handle. High risk, high reward. The story of his entire relationship with Victoria, really. That evening, after Maya was in bed, Daniel called his sister Caroline in Seattle. They didn't talk often. She had her own life, her own family, but she'd always been someone he could trust for honest advice. "Let me get this straight," Caroline said after he'd explained the situation. "Your girlfriend wants to put you in charge of an entire imprint?" "She didn't create it for me. It's been in the works for months." "But she's offering it to you specifically, knowing that you two are dating." "Yes." Caroline was quiet for a moment. "What does your gut tell you?" "That it's an incredible opportunity, that I'd be stupid to turn it down, but also that accepting it means even more scrutiny, even higher stakes. And if you fail, then I prove everyone right who said I couldn't succeed on my own merit. And if you succeed," Daniel thought about that, "then I prove them wrong, and I build something meaningful in the process." "Sounds like you've already made your decision." "Have I?" "Danny, you're my little brother and I love you, but you've always been terrible at taking risks. Rebecca practically had to propose to you because you were too scared to do it yourself." Caroline's voice was gentle but firm. "This woman is offering you a chance to build something real. Maybe it's because she loves you. Maybe it's because you're talented. Probably it's both. Does it really matter which?" "It matters to me." "Why? Because you need to prove you're worthy without help? That's pride talking, not sense." Caroline sighed. "Look, I know losing Rebecca made you careful, made you afraid to want things because wanting means risking. But you can't live your whole life playing it safe. Sometimes you have to trust that people offer you things because you deserve them, not because they pity you." The words hit harder than Daniel expected. Was that what this was about? Not just office politics, but his own fear of accepting something good, his conviction that he had to earn everything through suffering? "What if I mess it up?" he asked quietly. "Then you mess it up, and you learn from it and try again. That's what life is, Danny. You of all people should know that." They talked for a few more minutes before saying goodbye. Daniel sat in his dark living room, Caroline's words echoing in his head. He'd been so focused on what people would think, on proving himself, that he'd lost sight of the actual opportunity in front of him. A chance to build something meaningful, to take risks on voices that mattered, to create the kind of imprint he dreamed about during his years of fetching coffee and managing schedules. Victoria was offering him that, not as charity, but as a vote of confidence. And maybe it was time to have confidence in himself. Saturday morning, he called Victoria. "I want to do it," he said when she answered. "The imprint. I'm in." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Yeah?" "Yeah, but I have some conditions." "Name them." "I want full editorial control. No interference from you or the board unless I'm making decisions that threaten the company's financial stability. This has to be mine." "Done." "And I want to hire my own team. No nepotism, no friends of friends. Just the best people I can find." "Absolutely." "And Victoria? If this fails, I fail on my own. No safety net, no rescue. I need to know I can succeed or fail on my own merit." There was a pause. "That's going to be hard for me, watching you struggle and not being able to help." "I know, but it's important." "Okay, I agree to your terms. Victoria's voice turned warm. I'm proud of you. You know that? For taking this risk. I'm terrified. Good. That means it matters. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Fear, yes, but also excitement, purpose, the sense that he was finally stepping into something that was fully his. Maya wandered out of her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who were you talking to? Victoria, I just accepted a new job. A new job? Are you leaving your company? No, baby. I'm starting a new part of it. My own little section where I get to find and publish books I believe in. Maya climbed onto the couch next to him. Is that good? I think so. It's scary, but good. Ms. Victoria thinks you can do it? She does. Maya nodded seriously. Then you probably can. She's really smart. Daniel pulled his daughter close, marveling at her simple faith. If only adult decisions could be made with such clarity. The next weeks passed in a blur of planning and transition. Daniel worked with the board to define the imprint's scope and budget. He started reviewing resumes for his team, looking for editors and assistants who shared his vision for diverse, unconventional voices. He drafted a mission statement that felt true to his values while still being commercially viable. And through it all, Victoria was there, not interfering, but supporting. She'd send him articles she thought he'd find interesting, or text him encouragement after difficult meetings. She learned to recognize when he needed advice versus when he just needed to vent. Their relationship deepened as they navigated this new phase, learning to balance partnership with independence. In mid-December, Daniel hired his first editor, a brilliant woman named Keisha, who'd been overlooked for promotions at Random House, despite her track record of discovering emerging voices. She was talented, opinionated, and completely unintimidated by Daniel's connection to Victoria. I don't care who you're dating, she said bluntly in her interview. I care about whether you'll let me take risks and publish books that matter. Can you promise me that? I can promise you'll have more freedom here than anywhere else you've worked, Daniel said. But I can't promise every risk will pay off. Some books will fail. I can live with failure. I can't live with playing it safe. Daniel hired her on the spot. But just as things seemed to be stabilizing, just as Daniel started to believe they could actually make this work, the crisis he'd been dreading arrived. It started with an email from Marcus Chen, marked urgent, sent to both Daniel and Victoria. There had been a complaint filed with HR, anonymous, alleging that Victoria was using company resources to fund Daniel's imprint as a personal favor, that the business case was fabricated to justify nepotism, that Daniel's hiring of Keisha had bypassed normal HR protocols. None of it was true. The imprint had been thoroughly vetted by the board. Keisha's hiring had gone through all the proper channels. But the allegations didn't need to be true to cause damage. They just needed to create doubt. Victoria called an emergency meeting with Daniel, Marcus, and Patricia from HR. They gathered in Victoria's office on a Friday evening, the city dark and cold beyond the windows. This is a serious allegation, Patricia said, her expression grave. We need to investigate fully, which means auditing every decision related to the imprint's creation and Daniel's hiring processes. Audit away, Victoria said coldly. You'll find everything was done by the book. I'm sure it was. But Victoria, you need to understand the optics. An anonymous complaint, allegations of favoritism, the fact that you and Daniel are in a relationship, this could become a major problem if it gets out. So what are you suggesting? Daniel asked, though he already knew. Patricia looked between them with something like sympathy. I'm suggesting that until the investigation is complete, you two should consider whether maintaining your relationship is worth the professional cost, because right now it's putting both of you and this company at risk. The words landed like a physical blow. Daniel felt Victoria stiffen beside him. You're asking us to break up, Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm asking you to consider what's best for Hale Publishing, and for both of your careers. Patricia softened slightly. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but someone is actively trying to damage both of you, and as long as you're together, they have ammunition. After Patricia and Marcus left, Daniel and Victoria sat in her office in stunned silence. The unfairness of it pressed down on them both. That they'd done everything right, followed every rule, maintained every boundary, and still someone was using their relationship as a weapon. "We're not breaking up," Victoria said finally, her voice fierce. "I don't care what Patricia says. I'm not letting anonymous cowards dictate my personal life. But if this investigation drags on, if it becomes public, then it becomes public. Let people see that we have nothing to hide." Daniel wanted to agree, wanted to match her defiance with his own, but he kept thinking about Maya, about the life they'd built, about the fragile stability that could shatter if this turned into a scandal. "Victoria, maybe we need to think about this practically. If we take a break just until—" "No." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "No, Daniel, I won't do that. I've spent my whole life making practical decisions, sacrificing personal happiness for professional success, and it left me alone and miserable. I'm not going back to that, not even for the company. But I love you. I love Maya. I love the life we're building, and I'm not giving that up because someone filed an anonymous complaint." Victoria's voice broke. "If that makes me selfish or unprofessional, so be it, but I'm not losing you." Daniel pulled her close, his own eyes burning. They held each other as the city glittered indifferently beyond the windows, and he felt the full weight of impossible choices crushing down on them both. They could fight this, weather the investigation and the gossip and the scrutiny, or they could step back, protect their careers and Maya's stability by sacrificing what they'd built together. There was no good answer, just hard choices and uncertain outcomes and the terrible knowledge that loving someone sometimes meant hurting them. "We'll figure this out," Daniel whispered into her hair, not knowing if it was true but needing to say it anyway. "Together. We'll figure this out together." Victoria nodded against his chest, and they stayed like that for a long time, finding what comfort they could in each other's arms, while the storm gathered around them. The weekend after Patricia's ultimatum stretched out like a minefield. Daniel kept Maya busy with their usual routines: breakfast at their favorite diner, the library, a movie matinee. But his mind was elsewhere, circling endlessly around the impossible choice he and Victoria faced. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped, expecting news about the investigation or another crisis. But it was just Victoria, texting updates about her conversations with the board, her lawyer, her endless strategizing to find a way through this mess that didn't require them to tear apart what they'd built. Sunday evening, after Maya was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold in front of him and finally let himself think the thought he'd been avoiding all weekend. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe the only way to protect Victoria's company and his new imprint and Maya's stability was to step back from their relationship, not forever, just until the investigation concluded, until the gossip died down, until they could be together without it threatening everything they'd worked for. The thought made him physically ill. But what made him even sicker was the realization that he was thinking like someone who'd learned to survive by protecting himself, by choosing the safe path over the brave one. Rebecca would have been disappointed in him. His phone rang. "Victoria." "I can't sleep," she said without preamble. "I keep running scenarios and they all end badly." "Me too." "I talked to my lawyer yesterday. She says the investigation will probably take 2 weeks minimum. They have to interview everyone involved, review all the documentation, verify the timeline of decisions." Victoria's voice was tight with exhaustion. "And even if they clear us completely, the damage is done. People will remember the accusation more than the exoneration." Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "So what do we do?" "I've been thinking about that." Victoria took a shaky breath. "What if we go public? Not hiding, not apologizing, but openly acknowledging our relationship and defending it. Make a statement to the whole company about how we've maintained professional boundaries, how the imprint was thoroughly vetted, how we have nothing to hide. That could backfire spectacularly, or it could take away their ammunition. If we control the narrative instead of letting anonymous complaints define us, maybe we change the conversation." Daniel thought about it, trying to see all the angles. "It's risky." "Everything about us is risky, Daniel, but I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting other people's judgments dictate how we live." Victoria's voice strengthened. "I didn't build this company by playing it safe. I took risks, made bold moves, trusted my instincts. And my instincts tell me that you're worth fighting for, even if it costs you professionally." Even then, Because what's the point of all this success if I'm alone and miserable? I did that for 20 years. I'm not going back. Daniel felt something unlock in his chest. Victoria was right. They'd been so focused on managing other people's perceptions that they'd lost sight of what actually mattered, not the gossip or the politics or the careful navigation of corporate rules, but the simple truth that they loved each other and had done nothing wrong. Okay, he said, let's do it. Let's go public our way. Really? You're sure? I'm terrified, but I'm sure. They stayed on the phone until past midnight, planning their approach. They'd request a company-wide meeting, address the situation directly, present the facts about the imprint's creation and Daniel's qualifications. They'd be transparent about their relationship while maintaining that it hadn't compromised their professional integrity. And then they'd let the investigation proceed, confident that it would vindicate them. It was a gamble, but it was their gamble, made together on their own terms. Monday morning, Daniel woke with his stomach in knots but his mind clear. He got Maya ready for school with steady hands, kissed her goodbye at the school entrance, and headed to Manhattan with the determination of someone who'd finally stopped running from his own life. Victoria had scheduled the company meeting for 10 a.m. in the main conference hall. When Daniel arrived at the office, the energy was different, charged, expectant, like everyone knew something significant was about to happen. He made his way to his desk and tried to focus on work, but his eyes kept drifting to the clock. At 9:45, Victoria appeared at his desk. She was in full CEO mode, tailored suit, hair perfect, expression composed. But Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clasped together just a bit too tightly. "Ready?" she asked quietly. "As I'll ever be." They walked to the conference hall together, and Daniel felt every eye in the office tracking their movement. The hall was already packed. It seemed like every employee had shown up, drawn by curiosity or concern or the irresistible pull of workplace drama. Victoria took the stage with the confidence of someone who'd given 1,000 presentations. Daniel sat in the front row, his heart hammering, trying to project a calm he absolutely didn't feel. "Thank you all for coming," Victoria began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "I know there's been a lot of speculation lately about some personnel decisions and about my personal life. Rather than let rumors fill in the blanks, I wanted to address the situation directly and transparently." She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, a timeline of the imprint's development, starting 6 months before she and Daniel had even started dating. "As many of you know, the board and I have been discussing ways to diversify our publishing list and take more creative risks. That conversation led to the proposal for a boutique imprint focused on emerging voices and unconventional narratives. The business case was developed over several months and approved unanimously by the board in October. Click. The next slide showed the job description for the imprint's director, along with the qualifications required. When it came time to hire a director for this imprint, we looked for someone with strong editorial instincts, a track record of identifying promising manuscripts, and the courage to take calculated risks. Daniel Carter's work and acquisitions over the past 3 months demonstrated all of those qualities. He brought in 2 manuscripts that are generating significant industry buzz, and he showed the kind of innovative thinking we needed for this initiative. Victoria paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "I'm aware that Daniel and I are in a relationship. I'm also aware that this has led to speculation about whether my professional judgment has been compromised. So let me be absolutely clear. Daniel got this position because he earned it. The imprint was conceived and approved before our personal relationship began. His hiring went through all proper HR channels and was reviewed by both the COO and our head of HR to ensure there was no impropriety." She clicked to the next slide. Documentation of the hiring process, Marcus's approval, Patricia's sign-off, everything meticulously recorded. "I understand that some of you may be skeptical. That's fair. Workplace relationships, especially between people at different levels, raise legitimate concerns about fairness and favoritism. That's why Daniel now reports directly to the board, not to me. That's why all decisions regarding his compensation and performance are reviewed by multiple people to ensure objectivity. We've done everything possible to maintain professional boundaries while acknowledging that, yes, we care about each other personally." The room was silent, everyone hanging on her words. Victoria's voice softened slightly, becoming less CEO and more human. I've spent 20 years building this company. It's my life's work, and I've sacrificed a great deal for it. I've also learned that success without personal connection is hollow. When Daniel and I started seeing each other, we knew it would be complicated. We knew people would judge us, question our motives, assume the worst. We chose to move forward anyway because we believe in being honest about who we are, even when it's inconvenient. She looked directly at Daniel, and he saw the tears she was fighting to hold back. An anonymous complaint has been filed alleging favoritism and nepotism. We welcome the investigation because we know it will show that we've followed every rule, maintained every boundary, and acted with complete integrity. But regardless of what the investigation finds, I want you all to know this. I will not apologize for being in a relationship with a good man who makes me happy. I will not hide or feel ashamed of something that brings joy to my life. And I will continue to make the best decisions I can for this company, as I always have. Victoria clicked to her final slide. Just 2 words. Questions? For a moment, nobody moved. Then Keisha, Daniel's new hire, stood up from the middle of the room. I have a question, she said, her voice carrying clearly. Daniel hired me 3 weeks ago. I've worked with him almost every day since then, and I can tell you, without a doubt, that he's the real deal. He's smart, he's got great instincts, and he treats his team with respect. So my question is, why are we letting an anonymous complaint undermine someone who's actually doing excellent work? A murmur ran through the room. Then another editor stood up, an older man named Robert, who'd been with the company for 15 years. I've seen a lot of people come through this company, Robert said, and I've seen actual nepotism, actual favoritism, actual abuse of power. This isn't that. This is 2 professionals who happen to care about each other trying to do right by everyone. If we're going to start policing people's personal lives, we should at least have the courage to do it openly, not through anonymous complaints. More voices joined in, some supportive, some skeptical, some just asking practical questions about how the imprint would function. Victoria answered each one with patience and transparency, and Daniel watched her command the room with a mixture of pride and awe. Finally, Marcus stood up from the back of the room. Everyone fell silent, waiting for the COO's verdict. I've worked with Victoria for 12 years, he said, and I'll be honest, when I first heard about this relationship, I had concerns. Serious concerns about optics and fairness. But I've also watched how carefully both of them have navigated this situation. They came to HR immediately. They restructured their reporting relationship. They've been more transparent than they had to be. He paused. I still have some concerns, but I also trust Victoria's judgment, and I trust that our investigation will be thorough and fair. Until it concludes, I suggest we all focus on doing our jobs and let the process work. It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but it was something. Victoria nodded her thanks, and the meeting broke up into smaller conversations. Daniel made his way through the crowd toward the exit, fielding questions and comments, trying to gauge the overall reaction. It was mixed, he could tell. Some people seemed satisfied by Victoria's transparency, others remained skeptical, still others just seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. But at least it was out in the open now. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more letting anonymous accusations define the narrative. In the hallway outside the conference room, Victoria caught up with him. They couldn't embrace, not here with everyone watching, but she touched his arm briefly, and he felt the tremor in her hand. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, she said quietly. You were amazing. I'm shaking so hard I can barely stand. Me too. But we did it. We told the truth and let people make up their own minds. Now we just have to hope it was enough. The investigation proceeded with bureaucratic thoroughness. Patricia interviewed everyone involved in the imprint's creation, reviewed every email and document, traced every decision back to its origin. Daniel and Victoria were questioned separately, asked to account for timelines and conversations and the evolution of their relationship. It was invasive and exhausting and absolutely necessary. Through it all, Daniel threw himself into building his imprint. He hired 2 more editors, both talented people who'd been overlooked elsewhere. He started reading manuscripts with Keisha, debating which voices deserved to be heard, which stories mattered enough to take a risk on. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways his previous position had never been, and he found himself energized despite the stress of the investigation. Maya noticed the change in him. You're happy again, she observed one evening while they were making dinner. Even though you're worried about the investigation, you're still happy. I am, Daniel admitted. I'm doing work I believe in with people I respect. That makes a difference. And you're still with Ms. Victoria? I am. Is that okay with you? Maya stirred the pasta sauce thoughtfully. I like her, and she makes you laugh. You didn't laugh much before her. No, I didn't. So even if some people at work are mean about it, I think you should stay together, because laughing is important. Daniel pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her simple wisdom. You're absolutely right, Maya Bear. Laughing is important. 2 weeks after Victoria's company presentation, Patricia called them both into her office. Daniel's stomach was in knots as they walked through the halls together, maintaining professional distance but drawing strength from each other's presence. Patricia sat behind her desk with a thick folder of documentation. Her expression was neutral, giving nothing away. The investigation is complete, she said. I've reviewed all the evidence, interviewed everyone involved, and consulted with outside counsel to ensure objectivity. Daniel felt Victoria stiffen beside him. This was it. The moment that would determine whether they'd been right to fight for their relationship or whether their defiance had cost them everything. The allegations were unfounded, Patricia continued. The imprint was conceived and approved through proper channels, independent of your relationship. Daniel's hiring was vetted appropriately and his qualifications are legitimate. There is no evidence of favoritism, nepotism, or abuse of power. Relief flooded through Daniel so powerfully he felt lightheaded. Victoria's hand found his under the table, squeezing tight. However, Patricia continued, and Daniel's stomach dropped again. The investigation did reveal some concerns about perception and communication. While you've technically followed all the rules, the optics remain problematic. I'm recommending that the board implement additional oversight for any future decisions involving both of you, and that you continue to maintain separate reporting structures indefinitely. We can live with that, Victoria said immediately. There's one more thing. Patricia pulled out a separate document. We traced the anonymous complaint to its source. It came from Jennifer Matthews in marketing. Daniel's mind raced. Jennifer was someone he'd briefly dated about a year ago, before Rebecca's death had even finished reshaping his life into something recognizable. They'd gone on maybe 3 dates before mutually deciding there was no chemistry. He hadn't thought about her in months. Why would Jennifer file a complaint? Victoria asked, confused. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Apparently she and Daniel dated briefly, and she felt he'd led her on. When she learned about your relationship, she saw it as evidence that he'd been hung up on you all along. The complaint was less about actual policy violations and more about personal resentment. So this whole investigation, all this stress and scrutiny, was because of a grudge? Daniel's voice came out harsher than he intended. I'm afraid so. We've addressed the situation with Jennifer. She's been written up for filing a false complaint and is being transferred to a different department. Patricia's expression softened. I know this has been difficult for both of you. For what it's worth, I think you handled it with more grace than most people would have. After the meeting, Daniel and Victoria walked back to her office in stunned silence. Once inside with the door closed, Victoria finally let herself break down. She sank into her desk chair and covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. It's over, she said through tears. We're cleared. We did it. Daniel knelt beside her chair and pulled her into his arms. We did it together. They held each other for a long time, letting the relief wash over them. The investigation was over. They'd been vindicated. And while the gossip wouldn't disappear overnight, at least now there was an official record showing they'd done nothing wrong. I need to tell you something, Victoria said when she'd finally composed herself. During the investigation, when I thought we might lose everything, I realized something important. What? That none of it matters as much as I thought it did. The company, my reputation, what people think of me, it's all secondary to the people I love. You and Maya have become more important to me than any professional success. And if I'd had to choose, I would have chosen you. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I would have chosen you too. But I'm glad we didn't have to make that choice. Me too. Victoria smiled through her tears. So what now? Now we move forward. We build the imprint, we keep being transparent, and we stop letting other people's opinions control our lives. Daniel stood and helped Victoria to her feet. And tonight, if you're free, Maya wanted to know if you'd come over for dinner. She's been practicing making spaghetti carbonara. Really? She wants me there? She insisted, said you're part of our family now, and families eat dinner together. Victoria's eyes filled with fresh tears. I'd love that. More than anything. That evening, Daniel's small apartment was filled with laughter and the smell of somewhat burnt garlic bread, Maya's first attempt at making it from scratch. Victoria arrived with flowers for Maya and wine for Daniel, and the three of them squeezed around the tiny kitchen table that had once felt adequate, but now seemed too small for the family they were becoming. Maya regaled Victoria with stories from school, and Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she'd been paying attention to Maya's life. They ate imperfect carbonara and debated whether penguins or dolphins were cooler, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt the weight of worry lift from his shoulders. After dinner, while Daniel did dishes, Maya showed Victoria her room. The butterfly project now complete and hanging on the wall, the books scattered across her bed, the photos of Rebecca that Maya had arranged on her dresser. Daniel listened from the kitchen as Maya explained each photo, and he heard Victoria responding with the perfect balance of interest and respect for Rebecca's memory. She was really pretty, Maya said. She was. Your dad showed me pictures. Do you feel weird about dating him when he was married to someone else first? Daniel held his breath, waiting for Victoria's answer. A little bit, Victoria admitted. But your dad helped me understand that loving him doesn't erase what he had with your mom. It's different, but that doesn't make it less real. Does that make sense? I think so. Like how I love my dad and I loved my mom, but they're different kinds of love? Exactly like that. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you knew she was important, that she'll always be important. She will be. Always. Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for sharing her with me, Maya. That means a lot. When Victoria emerged from Maya's room, her eyes were red, but she was smiling. Daniel handed her a cup of tea and they settled on the couch while Maya got ready for bed. She's remarkable, Victoria said quietly. How did you raise such a wise, compassionate child? I didn't do it alone. Rebecca set the foundation. I'm just trying not to mess it up. You're doing a lot more than that. Victoria leaned against his shoulder. You're teaching her that love doesn't have limits, that families can grow and change, that it's okay to move forward while honoring the past. Those are big lessons. I'm learning them myself as I go. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Victoria said, I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next for us. Daniel's heart rate picked up. Yeah? I love you, Daniel, and I love Maya, and I want to build a life with both of you, not just date you when it's convenient. Victoria sat up and looked at him seriously. I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months, but I'm 42 years old and I've wasted enough time being careful and practical. I want to be with you, really with you. I want to wake up next to you and have breakfast with Maya and be part of your family, not just a visitor who comes over for dinner sometimes. Daniel's chest felt tight with emotions he couldn't name. What are you saying? I'm saying I want us to live together. Maybe not immediately. Maya needs time to adjust, and we should probably wait until after the imprint launches so it doesn't look like another scandal. But soon. I want to find a place that's big enough for all of us, where Maya has her own room, and you don't have to sleep on a couch anymore, and where we can build something that's ours. Victoria, I know it's a lot, and if you need time to think about it, I understand. But I needed you to know that I'm all in, completely, terrifyingly all in. Daniel thought about his small apartment, about the life he'd built here in the aftermath of loss, about how it had been enough for survival, but not enough for truly living. And he thought about Victoria, brilliant, vulnerable, brave Victoria, who was offering him a chance at happiness he'd thought was gone forever. I'm all in too, he said quietly. And you're right that Maya needs time, but Victoria, I want this. I want a life with you, a home we build together, a future that's bigger than just getting through each day. I want all of it. She kissed him then, soft and deep and full of promise. And when they broke apart, Daniel felt like he was breathing properly for the first time in 3 years. So we're really doing this, Victoria said, half statement and half question. We're really doing this. The next months were a careful dance of integration and growth. The imprint launched in January to positive industry buzz, and Daniel's first acquisitions started generating the kind of attention that validated Victoria's faith in him. Keisha and his other editors proved to be exactly the team he'd hoped for: talented, passionate, willing to take risks on voices that mattered. The office gossip gradually shifted from scandal to grudging acceptance. Daniel proved his worth through results, and Victoria proved that her judgment remained sound. They maintained their professional boundaries at work, but stopped hiding their relationship, and slowly people got used to seeing them together. In March, they found an apartment in Brooklyn, a 3-bedroom with enough space for Maya to finally have a real bedroom, for Daniel to have a home office, and for Victoria to not feel like she was constantly invading someone else's space. Moving day was chaos, boxes and furniture, and Maya's excitement bouncing off the walls. "This is so much bigger than our old place," Maya shouted, running from room to room. "That's because Victoria's helping with rent now," Daniel explained, unpacking books in what would become their shared office. "Does that mean she really lives with us?" "It does. Is that okay?" Maya paused in the doorway, considering. Then she smiled, that brilliant smile that was pure Rebecca, but also purely herself. "Yeah, it's okay. It's good." Victoria appeared behind Maya, paint smudges on her face from helping set up Maya's room. "Good? Just good?" "Really good," Maya amended. "The best, actually." They settled into their new home with the awkward adjustments of any blended household. Victoria learned that Maya needed quiet time after school to decompress. Maya learned that Victoria was not a morning person and needed coffee before conversation. Daniel learned to navigate the balance between partner and parent, to make space for Victoria's input without undermining his own authority. There were fights about discipline styles, about schedules, about the million small things that came with merging lives. But they worked through them with honesty and compromise, building something stronger for having weathered the conflicts. In May, Daniel's first book under the new imprint published, a memoir from a Syrian refugee that had been rejected by every major publisher for being too political, too raw, too risky. It became a surprise bestseller, and the critical acclaim that followed vindicated every decision Daniel had made. Victoria threw him a celebration dinner at a restaurant far nicer than anywhere they'd normally go, and Daniel invited his whole team, along with Maya and even his sister Caroline, who flew in from Seattle. Watching everyone he cared about gathered together, celebrating something he'd built with his own hands and judgment, Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. "I'm proud of you," Victoria whispered in his ear during dessert. "So incredibly proud. Couldn't have done it without you. You absolutely could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." That night, after everyone had gone home and Maya was asleep in her new room, Daniel and Victoria sat on their small balcony looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. The June air was warm and sweet, full of possibility. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, her hand finding his in the darkness. "About what?" "About making this permanent. About marriage and commitment and all those things I spent 20 years avoiding." Daniel's heart stuttered. "Are you proposing to me?" "Not yet, but I'm thinking about it. Is that something you'd want? Eventually?" Daniel thought about Rebecca, about the marriage they'd had and the family they'd built, about how he'd thought that chapter of his life was closed forever. And then he thought about Victoria, about Maya's easy acceptance of her, about the home they'd created together. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Eventually that's something I'd want very much." "Good. Because I've never been married and I'm terrified of messing it up, but I think maybe with you it could work. It definitely won't be perfect." "I don't need perfect. I just need real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, and Daniel felt something settle deep in his chest. This was happiness, not the euphoric kind he'd had with Rebecca, but something quieter and harder won. The happiness of choosing someone every day, of building something through compromise and conflict and commitment. 2 months later, on a Saturday in August, Daniel took Victoria and Maya to Central Park. They'd planned it as just a regular family outing. Nothing special, just the zoo and maybe ice cream after. But as they walked through the park where he and Victoria had first really talked, where they'd navigated the terrifying early days of their relationship, Daniel felt the weight of a small box in his pocket. He'd bought the ring 3 weeks ago, unable to wait for some perfect moment that might never come. It was simple. Nothing extravagant, because that wasn't who they were, but it felt right. At the Bethesda fountain, with the stone angels watching and the late summer sun warm on their faces, Daniel took a breath and knelt down. "Victoria Hale," he said, his voice shaking only slightly. "You've made me believe in second chances. You've shown me that life can hold joy even after profound loss. You've loved my daughter like she was your own, and you've made me want to be braver, to take risks, to stop playing it safe." Victoria's hands flew to her mouth, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "I don't have a grand speech prepared," Daniel continued, "but I have this. I love you. Maya loves you. And we both want you to be part of our family officially, permanently, forever. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Victoria just stood there crying. Then she dropped to her knees in front of him, not caring about her dress or the tourists taking pictures or anything except the man in front of her. "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed while people around them applauded, and Daniel felt Maya crash into both of them, her arms wrapping around them in a fierce hug. "Does this mean Victoria's really going to be part of our family?" Maya asked. "If that's okay with you," Daniel said. Maya looked at Victoria seriously. "Are you going to be my stepmom?" "I'd be honored to be your stepmom, but Maya, I'll never try to replace your mom. I just want to be someone who loves you and your dad and is part of your life." Maya considered this, then nodded. "Okay, but I get to help plan the wedding." "Deal," Victoria said, laughing through her tears. They were married in October, in a small ceremony at City Hall with just close friends and family. Maya stood between them as they exchanged vows, and when the officiant pronounced them married, all three of them cried. The reception was held at a restaurant in Brooklyn, nothing fancy but filled with people they loved. Daniel's publishing team was there, along with Victoria's sister and brother-in-law, Caroline and her family from Seattle, Maya's friends from school, and their parents. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. During their first dance, Victoria leaned close and whispered, "I never thought I'd have this. A partner, a family, a life that's about more than just work. And now? Now I can't imagine living any other way." Later that evening, Daniel found Maya sitting outside on the restaurant's patio, looking at the city lights. "Hey baby, what are you doing out here?" "Just thinking." Maya looked up at him with Rebecca's eyes. "Do you think Mom would be happy about you and Victoria?" Daniel sat down beside his daughter and pulled her close. "I think your mom would be thrilled that we found someone who makes us laugh again, who helps us remember that life is for living, not just surviving." "I think so too." Maya was quiet for a moment. "I still miss her." "I know, I do too. And that's okay. Loving Victoria doesn't mean we love your mom any less." "I know, Victoria explained that." Maya leaned against his shoulder. "I'm glad we have her now. Our family feels more complete." "Yeah, it does." They sat together watching the city, father and daughter, and Daniel thought about all the impossible choices that had led them here. The grief and the risk and the terrifying vulnerability of opening his heart again. It had been hard, so much harder than he'd expected. But sitting here with Maya, knowing Victoria was inside dancing with her sister, knowing they'd built something real and lasting and true, it had been worth every moment of fear. Victoria appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light from inside. "There you are. I was wondering where my family went." "Just getting some air," Daniel said, standing and extending his hand to her. Victoria took it, and Maya took her other hand, and together they walked back into the celebration. Three people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd chosen courage over safety, who'd proven that love wasn't something that happened once in a lifetime, but something you could build and rebuild as many times as you were brave enough to try. The party went late into the night, filled with laughter and dancing and toasts to new beginnings. And when Daniel and Victoria finally made it home in the early hours of the morning, Maya asleep in the back seat, they carried her up to her room together and tucked her in with the practiced choreography of a real family. In their own bedroom, as they changed out of wedding clothes and into comfortable pajamas, Victoria caught Daniel's eye in the mirror. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it. Built a life together despite everything trying to stop us?" "Yeah, that." Daniel crossed to her and pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made. Asking you out, taking the risk, choosing you every single day. Best decision I ever made, too." Victoria smiled against his chest. "Though technically, I asked you out." "You did, and I'll be grateful for that courage for the rest of my life." They stood holding each other as the Brooklyn night settled around them. Two people who'd learned that happiness wasn't something you stumbled into, but something you fought for, nurtured, protected. It wasn't always easy, wasn't always simple, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was absolutely worth every moment of fear and struggle it had taken to get here. Outside, the city hummed with a million other stories, other struggles, other people fighting their own battles between safety and risk, between surviving and truly living. But inside their small apartment, in the home they'd built together, Daniel and Victoria had found what they'd both been searching for without knowing it. Not perfection, not the absence of pain or fear or difficulty, but something better. A partnership built on honesty, courage, and the willingness to keep choosing each other even when it was hard. A family created not by accident, but by intention, not by obligation, but by love. And in the morning, when Maya came bouncing into their room, asking about breakfast and wedding cake leftovers, they'd wake up together and start again, building this life one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time, proving that second chances were real and love could bloom even in the most unlikely places if you were just brave enough to let it.